Mom wants us to come home for New Year, my husband said suddenly during our first holiday season as a married couple. I told him I wanted to visit my own family too, but he refused. To make things worse, his mother started criticizing me, saying I wasn't acting like a good wife and calling me a bad daughter-in-law. No matter how much I tried to talk it through, my husband always took his mother's side. I had enough. I couldn't keep playing this family game. I decided to take steps that would end my connection with my in-laws for good. My name is Abby, and I'm 28 years old. I married Malcolm, my boyfriend of 2 years. Our life as newlyweds was going well. We both worked full-time, so we shared the household chores. I didn't want all the housework to fall on me just because I was the woman, so I made sure we split the tasks fairly. I was happy with my job and personal life, and I even started thinking about having a child once things settled down. 1 month after our wedding, my in-laws suddenly invited me to their home. Actually, invited isn't the right word. It felt more like a summons. I'd met them before the wedding, but I'd been too nervous to really talk with them. I thought this could be a good chance to connect with my mother-in-law, so I went there with a positive attitude. However, when we arrived, things quickly turned sour. As soon as my husband and I sat down in the living room, my mother-in-law called out, "Abby, why are you sitting so comfortably? Make me some tea." I was taken aback and apologized, a bit flustered. I thought they'd treat me as a guest at their house. I didn't expect anything fancy, but I also didn't expect to be treated like a servant. As I made the tea, my mother-in-law kept complaining, "You're taking too long. Abby, don't you know you should warm the cup first?" She sighed constantly, watching every move I made. My father-in-law and my husband stayed silent. I thought to myself, if she has so many complaints, why doesn't she make the tea herself? I admit, I wasn't great at making tea, but it bothered me that she kept imposing her own high standards on me. Then, on another day, I was about to start cleaning our house when my mother-in-law suddenly called, asking us to come over. I hurried to her house with my husband, only to find her already angry. "Why didn't you bring any gifts? Isn't it normal to bring a gift when visiting your in-laws?" She scolded. She scolded me without any warning. "I didn't plan to go out today and only decided to come here at the last minute," I explained, but she cut me off. No excuses. These days, daughters-in-law are so quick to disrespect their mothers-in-law. I really ended up with a lousy daughter-in-law. I apologized, feeling trapped. Neither my husband nor my father-in-law said a word to help me. I didn't need them to defend me completely. I just wanted someone to step in and stop her unreasonable rant. After her lecture, I whispered to my husband, "Malcolm, can you say something to your mom?" It was a last-minute visit. There was no way I could have prepared a gift, but he just sighed, sounding annoyed. "Shouldn't you always have some gifts ready, just in case?" I agree with my mom on this. I was shocked and hurt. Is he serious? Why is he siding with his mom? My opinion of him was quickly dropping, and I was growing to resent my mother-in-law even more. After that, she constantly called me over, forcing me to follow their old-fashioned customs. She expected me to do all the chores, prioritize my husband and in-laws, and spend every New Year's holiday at their house. I thought, isn't this thinking too outdated? By our first New Year's holiday after marriage, I was already dreading visiting my husband's family. One day, he told me, "We're expected to go back to my parents' house for New Year's." "What? When do I get to visit my own family?" I asked. He shrugged. "It might be tough this time. We'll decide after New Year's." What? I was angry. "We promised we'd visit both families equally, remember?" He sighed, clearly annoyed. "It can't be helped now, right? Why bring this up again?" Why was he acting like this was no big deal? Before we got married, we had agreed that we would visit both families regularly. We'd even rented an apartment halfway between our parents' homes to make it fair. But now, we'd already visited his family 6 times, and I'd only been able to see my family once. This time, he expected us to stay at his parents' house from the end of the work week until work resumed after the holiday. I couldn't accept such a ridiculous plan. I told him, "At least let me visit my family before work starts again." He replied, "Ask Mom." So, I called my mother-in-law. As soon as she picked up, the first thing she said was, "Abby, you're in charge of making the special New Year's dinner." "Fine, I understand, but I will visit my family before work starts again, so please be prepared for that," I said firmly. My mother-in-law raised her voice in surprise. "What's this about prioritizing your own family? You lack the proper attitude of a daughter-in-law." She lectured me for an hour on the phone, leaving me totally drained. When I complained to my husband, he shrugged. "Mom just wants you to be a good wife. Abby, She always says, I want her to be a wife suitable for our family. His indifference was wearing me out, too. In the end, we spent the entire New Year's holiday at his parents' place. It's your first New Year as a married couple, so focus on his family this time, my own mom had advised, so I reluctantly agreed. But during our stay at my in-laws' house, I felt like a maid. I was responsible for everything, preparing meals, cleaning the house, doing the laundry, taking out the trash. I had to do it all by myself. When I asked my husband for help, I got scolded. Abby, isn't this a wife's job? Malcolm works hard all year, so he deserves to rest during New Year's, right? You're being really inconsiderate, my mother-in-law said. I wanted to shout. I work full-time, too, thanks to you. I haven't rested at all during the holidays, but I kept my thoughts to myself. It was the beginning of the new year and the first year of our marriage, so I forced myself to get through it. After the holiday, I still hadn't seen my family. When I finally planned to visit them, my husband said casually, I'm tired, I'll stay home, leaving me to go see my family alone. That was probably when I started losing trust in him. Of course, I was frustrated with my mother-in-law and my husband's family, but even more than that, I was fed up with my husband for never taking me seriously when I tried to talk about how I felt. Even after New Year's, my mother-in-law didn't stop her harassment. When I began refusing to visit her house, she started calling every day. By the time I'd wake up in the morning, I'd already have 10 missed calls from her. One morning, I saw I had missed calls from my mother-in-law. Thinking something serious had happened, I called her back, only for her to start yelling at me. So you finally woke up. You're not responsible enough as a wife. Get up at 5 a.m. every day and make Malcolm a nutritious meal. Even if I got home late from work, she would scold me, saying, I heard from Malcolm, it's unacceptable for a woman to stay late at work. A wife who doesn't come home before her husband is terrible. Prioritize your home, you selfish girl. I almost told her that I earned more than her son and actually contributed more to our living expenses, but I held it in and just muttered, yeah. Over time, I stopped answering her calls and deleted her voicemails without listening. This went on for about a year. Then the dreaded New Year's season came around again, and my husband started pestering me. Mom says you should come home for the New Year's holiday, he insisted, but this time, I firmly told him, I'm not going this year. I can't take it anymore. I'm not a housekeeper. Annoyed, my husband grumbled, Abby, don't upset my mom. You married me, so at least be considerate of my family. Excuse me? You never even make an effort to visit my family, and I've worked really hard to get along with your mom. That's why she's always mad, he snapped. You need to try harder. I felt my anger rising. Why is he acting like this is all my fault? Then he dropped the final bomb. Mom says you're a failure. That's why she's mad at you. At that moment, the frustration I'd been holding back finally exploded. A failure? I thought. I've put your family first all this time, for your sake, and this is what I get? Taking a deep breath, I looked him in the eye and said, I'm cutting ties with your family. I'm never seeing your mom or dad again. He looked shocked, but then quickly realized arguing would be pointless. Fine, he said, I'll go to their place alone for the holidays. After that, things were a bit tense between us, and we talked less at home, but honestly, I didn't care. For the first time in ages, I was able to spend the New Year's holiday with my own family, and that alone made me incredibly happy. When I arrived at my parents' house, my mom looked concerned. Abby, is everything okay with Malcolm's family? I can't help but worry. I'm fine, Mom. I made it clear I'm not going to be involved with them anymore. Is that so? I hope everything will be all right, she said, still looking a little uneasy. I enjoyed the time at home, leaving the chores to my mom for a change. I was finally relaxing when the doorbell rang. I quickly went to answer it, only to find my husband standing there, looking exhausted. I was shocked to see him. What? I thought you were going to your parents' house today, I said, letting him in. He stood there, saying nothing, until I finally demanded an explanation. Well? He looked at me and finally spoke. Mom said to bring you with me. My mother-in-law's persistence was unbelievable, but I held my ground. Didn't I tell you I'm not going back to your parents' house? When I said I was cutting ties with them, you agreed, didn't you, Malcolm? I reminded him. Yeah, but Mom's really angry. She says it's unthinkable for a daughter-in-law not to visit her in-laws. I don't care, I said firmly. I can't take your mother's harassment anymore, and your dad just ignores it all. I'm done with them. Malcolm looked worried, but that's a problem. Abby, Like Mom said, you married into this family, please consider my position. Your position? I snapped. What era are you living in? I didn't get married to be your parents' housekeeper. I'm tired of dealing with in-laws who harass me and a husband who won't stand up for me. I'd never spoken so directly before. He looked startled but still didn't seem to get it. If you keep taking your mother's side, I'll divorce you. Divorce? You're kidding, right? I'm serious. Why should I stay married to a husband who doesn't help me and only does what his mother wants? I'd be much happier on my own. When he saw how serious I was, his face went pale. Just then, his phone rang. Seeing the caller ID, he looked alarmed. It was his mother. He answered in a nervous voice, and I could hear her loud voice even from where I stood. Losing patience, I grabbed the phone from him. Hello, mother-in-law. It's me, Abby. No matter what you say to Malcolm, I'm not coming over anymore. What? You're my daughter-in-law, aren't you? I won't accept that, she shot back, undeterred. Daughter-in-law? What is this? The Stone Age? It's the 21st century, I replied sharply. What an insolent bride. You can at least show up for family events. No way, I said firmly. Malcolm is free to visit as much as he wants, but I won't be coming. Whether it's a special occasion or not, I absolutely won't be going. I told her firmly, if you keep pushing, I'll divorce Malcolm. Divorce? Are you trying to bring shame to him? She snapped. Then fine, I said, let's divorce, and I'll remarry under my own last name. How about that? That's absurd. I won't allow it, she fumed. Do as you please, I replied calmly, but no matter what you say, I have no intention of dealing with you or your family again. Goodbye. With that, I hung up. Then I turned to Malcolm and said, here's the deal. If you take your mother's side, we're done. But if you understand my point of view and treat me as an equal, we can make this work. Malcolm looked down for a long time, thinking. Finally, he said, I understand. I choose you, Abby. Since then, I stopped visiting my in-laws, and my mother-in-law stopped contacting us as well. Malcolm, maybe realizing how he had acted, now regularly visits my parents, and, of course, my parents treat him well and appreciate him like their own son. They certainly don't treat him like a servant. I know we'll face challenges in the future, but with Malcolm choosing to stand by me, I'm hopeful we'll tackle each one together.
My name is Amy Snyder, and I'm 27 years old. I reside with my father and mother. Our family has always stuck together as a trio since my early years. Growing up, I've always admired my dad. He's the epitome of hard work, running his own bustling business. Though his schedule keeps him away from home most of the time, whenever he finds a moment, he dedicates it to me. On his off days, he prioritizes spending time with me, proving himself to be an exceptional father. My mom, however, paints a different picture. As far back as I can recall, she has never been employed. While she tends to household matters, she's never lent support to my dad's business or pursued a career outside our home. Despite our comfortable lifestyle, with my mom often seen socializing and attending events, her lack of involvement in my life has left me feeling somewhat neglected. There were moments of profound loneliness, but my dad's unwavering presence always filled that void. He understood the indifference my mom held towards me and made it his mission to ensure I never felt neglected or alone. As I grew older, my mother's tendency to break promises became apparent. While my dad's commitments were steadfast, my mother's casual approach to promises left me disillusioned. I learned not to hold her pledges in high regard. Conversely, my dad's reliability and trustworthiness garnered my admiration. I even entertained thoughts of joining his company after graduating from university. Being the only child, I saw it as a way to honor my father's legacy and continue his work. Upon reaching my 20s, my father began imparting invaluable wisdom during our outings for drinks. Meanwhile, my mother's involvement in my life remained superficial. The only time she interjected was during my sophomore year of college when I expressed my desire to join my father's company. Dad, I want to work at your company after graduation. I'm already preparing for it. I want to follow in your footsteps someday, I announced eagerly. Amy, are you sure about that? A girl doesn't need to pursue such endeavors. My mother intervened, her words dripping with traditional expectations. Why not? I want to work hard like Dad, I insisted. A woman should find a good man and let her husband provide for her, she countered, echoing typical sentiments. Disheartened by her lack of understanding, I chose not to engage further. I refused to live a life tethered to someone else's ambitions, mirroring my mother's existence. I had always aspired to become an independent woman, determined to navigate through my college years on my own terms. After that pivotal moment, I dedicated myself to diligent study, paving the path to join my father's company immediately after graduation. Though my mother remained unconvinced, it seemed she eventually resigned herself to my decision. "If you choose to live this way, so be it. But remember, you'll bear the consequences of not heeding your mother's advice," she remarked resignedly. "If you're willing to accept that, then do as you please." So I followed her directive by stepping into my father's company, inadvertently widening the chasm between my mother and me. Conversely, my bond with my father deepened as we spent more time together. Reflecting on it now, I realized my mother wasn't pleased with the turn of events. Upon joining my father's company, he invested considerable effort in my training, which, unbeknownst to me, was driven by his declining health. It took him nearly half a year to acquaint me with the intricacies of the job before he collapsed at our workplace, swiftly whisked away to the hospital. Over the next 5 years, he valiantly battled his illness. "Emmy, how's the company faring without your dad?" my mother inquired, her concern veiled by skepticism. "It's challenging, but everyone's rallying behind me. Dad entrusted me with everything I need," I replied confidently. "Well, as long as that's the case, just ensure you don't leave the company to ruin as the second generation," she cautioned, her words tinged with apprehension. "You lack any genuine interest or affection for the company. You're merely preoccupied with others' perceptions," I retorted, disheartened by her lack of faith. During my father's illness, our disagreements were frequent. Despite his weakening state, he made sporadic visits to the company, emphasizing its significance. "These employees in this company are invaluable treasures to me, but I must relinquish my hold on them," he confessed, his voice laced with emotion. "Amy, I've witnessed your dedication over the years. I trust you to safeguard this place and everyone here. I don't know if I can emulate you, Dad, but I'll strive to uphold your legacy," I pledged solemnly. From that day forth, the mantle of leadership was bestowed upon me. With my father mostly confined to the hospital, my days were consumed with the company's affairs, leaving little time for homecomings. I prioritized visiting him regularly, carving out time amidst my busy schedule. My mother, on the other hand, fulfilled only the basic duties, such as delivering changes of clothes to him. Even that seemed to inconvenience her. I couldn't help but wonder about her feelings towards my father. Did she lack any sense of gratitude or compassion for his illness? The thought left me feeling sorry for him, recalling the sacrifices he made for me during my childhood, a time when my mother's affection remained elusive. Despite my exhaustion, I made a concerted effort to visit him as often as possible, a routine that persisted for about a year until he peacefully passed away in his sleep. Amidst the whirlwind of tasks that followed, I barely had a moment to grieve. My mother, oblivious to my emotional turmoil, expected me to handle everything from funeral arrangements to hospital paperwork. Realistically, I knew I couldn't rely on my mother, who had never ventured beyond the confines of our home. So I silently assumed responsibility for the myriad tasks. The day after the funeral, my mother broached the subject. "Amy, now that the funeral's over, you've settled down, haven't you?" she inquired. With a heavy heart, I accepted the reality of the situation. "Please leave this house. I've just inherited 200 million yen, so I have no use for you anymore." "Thank you," she declared, as though it were a mere formality. Her words stung, but I had anticipated them. Further discussion seemed futile. Did she truly believe that wealth could replace familial bonds and absolve her of responsibility? With a multitude of questions swirling in my mind, I made the decision to depart. The next day, I arranged for the sale of all belongings associated with me, leaving my mother utterly surprised at the speed of my departure. I had meticulously planned my departure, but I harbored a secret from my mother. Despite her claim of inheriting 200 million yen, my father had entrusted all financial matters to me, designating me as the sole inheritor. Not a single yen remained for my mother, a decision my father made adamantly while he was still in good health. "Your mother lacks the understanding of money management or prudent spending. I want you to provide her with monthly household expenses," he instructed me. "If she receives a lump sum, she's likely to squander it immediately. If she protests, refuse to give her a penny." Though my father's last words were spoken in jest, he handed me an SD card containing a video message addressed to my mother. While I never envisioned showing it to her, recent events suggested its necessity might arise sooner than later. After my departure, I anticipated my mother would reach out to me, but her summons came sooner than expected. "Come home immediately," she demanded over the phone. "I'm working, Mom. What's the matter?" I replied, feeling a pang of annoyance. "I just need to talk to you." "Please come quickly," she insisted. With a sigh, I reluctantly headed back to our family home, clutching the SD card in my hand. As soon as my mother laid eyes on me, she launched into accusations. "You absconded with all of your father's inheritance, didn't you? I knew something was amiss when you left so abruptly. Hand over your father's inheritance to me now," she demanded, her greed palpable. "How selfish can you be? You can't even fulfill your duties as a mother," I retorted, my frustration simmering. In response, I silently extended the SD card to her. Confused, she inspected it. "What's this?" she queried. "I suppose you don't even know how to watch this," I remarked, masking my disappointment. I retrieved my laptop, inserted the SD card, and played the video. On the screen, my father appeared, as vibrant as I remembered him. I couldn't help but wonder how my mother would react to this video letter. Silently, I exited the room, leaving her to watch it alone. I had never witnessed my mother defy my father before, but now, in the wake of his passing, would his words resonate with her? Upon returning to the room, I found my mother in tears, her emotions laid bare. I was taken aback, my mother, shedding tears over a video of my late father. I was intrigued by the contents of the video letter he had left for her, but hesitated to watch it myself. Consequently, I remained clueless about the cause of her tears. "Mom, are you okay?" I inquired, concern lacing my voice. "Yes, I'll be fine. For now, I understand. I'll adhere to your father's wishes and entrust everything to you from now on. Please, go home for today. Call me once you've had time to gather yourself," she replied, her tone subdued. Sensing her desire for privacy, I left promptly, pondering over how my father had managed to silence my mother. Questions swirled in my mind as I made my way home. Nearly a month passed without any communication from my mother, prompting concern to gnaw at me. During my lunch break, I decided to pay a visit to my parents' house, hoping to check on her. However, she wasn't home. That evening, I returned once more, relieved to find the lights on. "Sorry for dropping in unexpectedly. I came by this afternoon, but you weren't home, so I grew concerned," I explained upon seeing her. "I'm sorry, I was out for my part-time job during the day," my mother explained upon my return. "A part-time job?" I echoed incredulously. My understanding of my mother painted her as someone vehemently opposed to work. How had it come to this? "Didn't you watch that video?" "It was a video letter addressed to you," I retorted, baffled by her sudden change in behavior. "You can take it home." "You should watch it too, Hammy." "Can I watch it?" I asked, extending the SD card to her. "Very well," she acquiesced, passing it back to me. Feeling a twinge of apprehension, I returned to the office and settled at my father's desk. With a deep breath, I played the video. "Honey, if you're watching this, it means you've not been able to communicate with Amy. First of all, thank you so much for helping me raise Amy until now. Without you, I don't think I could have managed the company while bringing up Amy." My father's voice resonated through the room. As his words continued, a sense of unease crept over me. Then he uttered something unexpected, something that shook me to my core. "You've taken care of Amy, even though she is not your child, and I have nothing but gratitude for you. You've stood by my side for so many years, but as a result, you've given up on your dreams and have reached your age without earning your own living. For that, I take responsibility because I have allowed you to live a life of luxury. I'm sure you'll be in trouble when I'm gone." "I'm not my mother's child," I blurted out, the realization hitting me like a ton of bricks. But then it clicked. Despite the lack of overt affection, she had cared for me every day, doing the bare minimum for a child who wasn't her own. Who was this person? "I didn't register our marriage because you told me you felt bad for your sister, so I ended up supporting your living and didn't do anything else. I'm sorry, but once I'm gone, I worry about the rest of your life. There's no one to support you, and I've taken your life away." I sat in disbelief as my father spoke, his words flowing with unexpected clarity. It was all news to me, his concerns, his regrets, his hopes for our future. Throughout the night, I grappled with the weight of his revelations before confronting my mother the following day. "Mom, I watched the video from Dad yesterday. You know it all now. I began, my voice tinged with a mixture of confusion and realization. I raised you because I was asked to, that's all, she confessed, her tone heavy with the weight of untold truths. What happened to my biological mother? I pressed, seeking clarity amidst the swirling chaos of newfound information. You were the child of my sister and your father, she explained somberly. My sister died right after giving birth to you, and I promised your distressed father that I would help raise Amy. I would become your mother. With her revelation, everything fell into place, even the parts I had previously only imagined. I learned of my mother's sacrifice, how she had set aside her own dreams to fulfill her promise to my father. I recalled how my mother used to work in a diner, her vibrant spirit and dedication palpable. Her dream had been to own her own diner, yet when she chose to become my mother, she shelved that dream. However, inspired by my father's words and prompted by the memory of her deferred dream, my mother made a decision. She resolved to reclaim that dream, embarking on a journey to pursue it once more. Currently, she is undergoing training as a part-timer, determined to turn her dream of owning a diner into reality. I should have done this earlier. Working is fun and suits me. I had no idea, so it's my fault you didn't work. I'm really sorry for not knowing anything, my mother admitted, her tone filled with regret. It's not your fault, Amy. I made the decision myself. But I'm not good with children, so I couldn't handle you well. I'm the one who caused you trouble, she continued, taking responsibility for her actions. As we conversed, I realized it was the first time we had such an open dialogue. At this stage in my life, I finally felt like I had come to understand my mother a bit better. Our conversations became more frequent, leading us to a decision: to use the money left by my father to fund the opening of her shop. Once she started working, my mother became somewhat more humble. She hesitated when the topic of funds for the shop came up, a behavior that would have been unimaginable not too long ago. While maintaining my regular job, I also assisted with the opening of her diner. This brought me into frequent contact with my mother, fostering a newfound relationship between us. Regarding living expenses, she insisted on managing them with her own income, refusing to accept help from my father's inheritance, promising that you'll tell me if you're struggling. After all, Dad trusted me to take care of you, I urged her. I'll be fine living on my own. It doesn't cost that much. But in terms of my diner's expenses, she trailed off, her determination evident. I'll be relying on you. Of course, I'm looking forward to it too. So do your best, my mother encouraged, her eyes filled with hope and anticipation. After many years, we finally became a real family. And now we are living harmoniously. She isn't my birth mother, and perhaps it was just the right time for me to learn this truth. Your diner is finally going to open tomorrow. Your dream is coming true, I remarked, filled with pride as I watched her dedication. Seeing you work so hard at that company reminded me of my own dreams when I was younger. I believe that's why I've made it this far. It's all thanks to you and your father. Thank you so much, Mom. I expressed my gratitude, feeling a deep sense of appreciation. Promise me to always be my mom, Amy, she implored, her voice filled with sincerity. From now on, let's get along even better than before. After all, we only have each other, I replied, feeling a newfound sense of closeness. Upon my father's death, the truth was revealed, and I accepted the reality of our situation. Deciding to live on with just my mother and me, I contemplated moving back to my hometown and living together with her again. I don't cook, so my mother is concerned about my poor diet and is supportive of me coming back, I explained, feeling touched by her care. My father would probably be surprised that we're getting along so well. His house, company, and inheritance that he left behind. I'll protect them at all costs while continuing to get along with my mother in order to become a real family, I vowed, determined to honor my father's legacy. We visited the graves of my father and my biological mother, my mother's older sister, to give our daily life updates. After going through the process of adoption, I finally became registered as my mother's daughter, forging a bond that transcended bloodlines. My name is Amelia. I didn't grow up rich, but I still managed to get a job and get married. My husband's name is Edward, and he works at a fancy hotel. I thought my life would be a fairy tale, But things didn't turn out that way. My childhood home wasn't wealthy. We didn't have a lot of money, but I don't blame my parents at all. They gave up nice things for me, took me to fun places, and taught me about different cultures. Maybe they loved geography, but as a kid, I often thought they were trying too hard for me. I didn't want my parents to worry about me anymore, so I decided to start working right after middle school. My mom would say, "You should at least finish high school. It might be hard to find a job without it." And my dad would agree, "Yes, we have enough money saved to send you to high school." I was really happy about how my parents felt, but more than that, I really wanted to make life easier for them as soon as possible. "It's okay. The sooner I start working, the sooner I'll start earning more," I said, not very sure of myself. But like my parents said, there was no guarantee I would find a job. During that time, I had a friend named Jessica who had moved here from another country when we started middle school. Her family wasn't rich either, which might be why we got along so well and always hung out together. Jessica could speak some English, so we managed to communicate. Without realizing it, I started learning Spanish by talking with her. By the time I was in 9th grade, I could speak Spanish pretty well. Maybe it was my Spanish skills that helped because, surprisingly, a travel agency decided to hire me. They saw value in my ability to speak Spanish. Jessica and I, having both left school after middle school, started working and gradually lost touch. I focused on my job, determined to earn money. Time passed quickly, and soon I was 26 years old. I often used a lounge in a hotel for work. It was a fancy but cozy place, and the snacks and coffee were reasonably priced. We had our meetings there with the staff. The waiter working there at the time was Edward. The hotel hosted many foreigners, so he spoke Spanish too. Sometimes I would be there with foreign guests. Maybe because we both spoke Spanish, we connected right away. Edward started a conversation, and before I knew it, we were in a whirlwind romance that led to marriage. For a girl from a poor family, getting married was a big deal. I expected to start an exciting new life. However, reality was quite different. When we were getting married, Edward had a request. "If it's okay with you, Amelia, I'd like us to live at my family home." His father had passed away a few years ago, and he was worried about his mother living alone. Her energy levels were dropping, and having someone around to help her seemed like a good idea. Since I worked remotely, Edward thought it would be convenient for me to stay home, look after his mother, and handle the household chores. On the flip side, Edward often worked long hours and wasn't home much. With his rare days off, having me, a home-based worker, around must have seemed like a good arrangement to him. But I couldn't agree to it right away. When I first visited Edward's family home to introduce myself before our marriage, his mother reacted strangely after asking about my education. "Amelia, which university did you graduate from?" she asked. When I honestly replied, "Well, I didn't go to college. I only finished middle school," my mother-in-law went silent and just looked at me. Her expression showed she looked down on me. "Oh, middle school, well," she said, eyeing me with disdain. Because of this, I thought living with her might not be easy, so I mentioned my concerns to Edward casually. "Edward, do you think your mom has some doubts about me?" I asked him. He chuckled a bit and replied, "Nah, that's not true. Mom trusts me, and I'm sure she doesn't have any bad feelings toward my wife either." His words made me think maybe I was worrying too much. Edward also promised that if any issues arose, he would talk to his mother for me. With that reassurance, I agreed to move in with his family. But once I started living there, things weren't as smooth as I'd hoped. It was a harsh reality check. Whenever Edward and I visited his family's house, his mother would speak to him with such warmth. "Edward, thank you. I'm so grateful you're living with me," she would say, and Edward would respond, "Of course, I knew it would help you out." They seemed like such a close mother and son. But towards me, my mother-in-law's attitude was completely different, cold even. "Well, Amelia, just make sure you don't hold Edward back," she'd say emotionlessly, as if she was giving orders to a servant. It was clear she still looked down on me, but at that moment, Edward stood up for me. "Don't worry. Amelia is doing a great job working too," he said. However, when I mentioned this, my mother-in-law briefly looked stern, a detail I didn't miss. I figured I should talk to Edward if things ever got troublesome and decided to handle it my way. We were family after all, and I didn't want any tension between us. That's how we started living together, but reality didn't bend in a favorable direction. Once, as I was working on my computer as usual, my mother-in-law burst into my room and said angrily, "Hey, Amelia, when are you going to clean my room? It needs to be done by 10 o'clock a.m. every day." I was surprised because I had never heard of such a rule before. Sure, I agreed to do household chores, but we never discussed to what extent. If she had just told me kindly from the beginning, that would have been fine. After all, I have my own job and can't be available all the time. However, arguing wouldn't be mature, so I quickly finished my work, apologized, and started cleaning her room. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law was just relaxing in the living room, watching TV and eating snacks. Edward had mentioned concerns about his mother's health, but she seemed well enough to clean her own room. I had imagined she might have difficulty walking, but she was more lively than I thought. Once the cleaning was done, she immediately ordered, "Now start making dinner. And I like it plain. I won't tolerate anything too strong." She even told me to go shopping for ingredients right away. I thought it was too early to start cooking, but I decided to get it done and return to my work. When I got back from shopping, my mother-in-law was surprisingly still relaxing. It was hard not to feel annoyed, but I chose to hold back and just finish what needed to be done. I thought maybe she was testing me, hoping she'd understand in time, but that hope lingered for months. There were days when she complained about me being just 5 minutes late with the laundry or that the bathtub wasn't cleaned perfectly, nitpicking to an almost obsessive degree. Before I knew it, I ended up doing all the chores around the house, while my mother-in-law just lounged around. Honestly, if she had the energy to nitpick, she could very well do some chores herself. I started to worry that if this continued, it would start affecting my job too. That was the last thing I needed, so I decided to wait until the evening to talk to Edward about it. Once my mother-in-law had gone to bed, I told him everything. "Hey, I think your mom just doesn't like me. I'm getting so tired of being constantly criticized." But Edward just chuckled and said, "Come on, that can't be true. Mom's a kind person. There won't be any issues as long as Amelia doesn't do anything strange. Please try to get along with her." He didn't believe me. Maybe it's because she's always doting on him and never complains to him. In fact, when Edward's around, my mother-in-law says, "Amelia, why don't you take a break and have some tea?" But even knowing that, there's a limit to my patience with this kind of life. I spend all day doing household chores and end up having to work on my job at night. To be honest, my trust in Edward is starting to fade. If nothing changes, I might just collapse from all the stress. Then, in the midst of all this, my mother-in-law dropped a bombshell. "Amelia, I'll be away for about a week in about 3 months from now, so make sure you keep the house in order, okay?" She sprang this on me out of nowhere. When I asked what was going on, she said, "Edward suggested we go on an overseas vacation." That's my boy, always knowing. I was thrilled at the thought of traveling abroad. I couldn't wait, but when my mother-in-law dropped the bomb about the vacation, I was shocked. Edward hadn't mentioned a word of it to me, and it seemed like I was being left out, expected to stay behind and manage the house. I needed to talk to Edward about this right away, so I brought it up that night. His response was surprising. "Oh, Mom already told you, but you're coming too, right?" It turned out we had misunderstood each other. It seems my mother-in-law had lied to me. Even if Edward wants me to go, I can't possibly enjoy a trip with her. In frustration, I told him, "I don't want to go. I can't possibly have a good time with your mother." Then Edward completely lost it and lashed out. "Amelia, what the heck are you saying? How long are you going to keep up this childish nonsense? I won't allow you to speak ill of Mom like that. You better reflect on this. It's a vacation abroad for crying out loud, and I want to enjoy it too," he retorted. I was completely shocked. I couldn't believe Edward wouldn't trust me this much. Staying in that house had become nothing but agony for me. To prove to Edward that I was telling the truth, I decided to take action. The next day, since Edward was off work, the 3 of us had breakfast together. That's when I confronted my mother-in-law. "You're trying to leave me out of the trip abroad, aren't you?" My mother-in-law replied defiantly, "Oh, did I say that, Amelia? If you want to come, just come along, right?" But Edward interrupted, "Hey, Amelia, don't you understand yet? Apologize to Mom. Why are you being so defiant? You're not a child anymore." Despite my desire to clear things up and make Edward understand, my mother-in-law insulted me in the worst way. "Well, maybe Amelia should just stay home, right? It's too early for someone like you to travel abroad. You won't appreciate the experience with your lack of education. Besides, lazing around at home every day without working. Do you even deserve to go abroad? You know it, don't you? She said. I was shocked that she still believed I was unemployed. I've explained my job to you multiple times, even during our greetings. I've told you what I do, haven't I? I confronted her, but she just looked down on me. What job? Remote work. Don't joke with me. You're just playing on the computer at home. It's been getting on my nerves every day. There's no way you're making money with that. You're just stealing Edward's earnings, she blurted out. That really made me angry, but before I could respond, she went even further. I have Edward, and that's enough for me. Edward can speak Spanish and works at a renowned hotel. There's no need to waste his earnings on a woman like you, uneducated and unemployed. A bottom feeder like you should just leave as soon as possible, she continued. She just kept going. After all her harsh words, I looked at Edward, hoping he would understand. But his response was unexpected. Well, I can understand how Mom feels. Maybe Amelia needs to cool off a bit, he said nonchalantly, as if he was fed up with me. At that moment, I made a decision. I couldn't endure being treated like this by both the mother and son any longer. Even though my mother-in-law told me to leave, I still wanted to confirm. Am I really supposed to leave? I asked. Laughing, she replied. Of course, leave as soon as you can. We don't need bottom feeders like you around. So I said, understood, and began preparing to move out. I simply nodded to the two of them and left the house. As I was leaving, my mother-in-law called after me with a sneer. Enjoy your poor life, as it suits a bottom feeder like you. But they didn't realize that consequences would follow their actions. About 3 months after I left the house, around the time when they were scheduled to go on their trip abroad, my mother-in-law called me. Amelia, I finally reached you. What's going on? She sounded quite frantic. First, I replied, I'm surprised you managed to call this number. She said, of course, I tried several times and couldn't get through. I even called your parents' house to get your new number. I had informed my parents that either Edward or my mother-in-law might call. If they did, they should call back at this number. What's wrong? I asked in a panicked tone. She said, what's wrong? We're getting all sorts of collection letters. Help me out. I didn't know about any of this. Well, that's expected. You haven't been paying the utilities, have you? I simply answered. My mother-in-law seemed lost in her thoughts. I absolutely thought Edward was covering our living expenses. To find out you were paying for everything, why didn't you tell me? I had no idea you were making that much money. It's a bit late to bring this up now, I said, though perhaps Edward finally told her the truth. That's right. I had already started my own business using the expertise I'd gained from the travel agency. I used to work for a travel agency, and now my own business had grown to the point of earning $20 million, being widely accepted around the world. What shocked my mother-in-law even more was probably Edward's income. Just because he worked in a lounge at a well-known hotel didn't mean he was making a lot of money. If anything, Edward was just an average worker on the lower end of the pay scale. And speaking Spanish at that hotel was nothing special. There were many Spanish speakers there. Even if he could speak it, it wasn't anything remarkable. There's no way his income could cover the living expenses for 3 people. In reality, just making ends meet for himself was all he could manage. It's ridiculous that she hadn't realized until a collection notice came that I was the one paying all the living expenses for my husband's family. But the more I listened to my mother-in-law, the more shocking facts came to light. The reason why she insisted on me living with them wasn't to keep an eye on her. It was because she had been living off my father-in-law's wealth. Blinded by a temporary influx of cash, she had spent lavishly until there was nothing left. That's when she turned to Edward, presuming he was earning well. But Edward knew his income was low, and he was somewhat aware of my earnings. Which is why he turned to me for help. Hearing this only confirmed how irresponsible they were. But their irresponsibility didn't stop there. By the way, are you managing to make the car payments? My mother-in-law exclaimed, raising her voice. Exactly. Both Edward and I have bills piling up since you moved out. I've been receiving more and more credit card statements addressed to both of us. The amounts due each month kept increasing, and before I knew it, they amounted to quite a sum. Their level of luxury spending was beyond me. I have no idea how they were spending without paying the living expenses, But Edward's bills had surpassed his salary, and my mother-in-law hadn't stopped her old habits of lavish spending. It seemed they had both gotten themselves into debt, now totaling over $440,000. What's even more shocking is they thought Edward would somehow manage it if it was just a bit of debt, as my mother-in-law put it, and Edward thought I would take care of it if things got tough. The level of dependency in grown adults was appalling. Beyond exasperation, I was starting to feel the danger. So when my mother-in-law brazenly said, "So Amelia, you can sort this out for us, right?" I was astonished by her audacity. I made it clear to her, after everything that's happened, you're asking for help now. There's no way in helping. That's when Edward suddenly took the phone. "Hey Amelia, you're my wife. You have a duty to help us out. Do something. We can't pay this off." I couldn't believe their nerve, but I did offer him a glimmer of mercy. "So you want to come over? I might consider it if you do." He was immediately enthusiastic. "Oh yeah, you'll let us stay and you'll sort out the money. Then let's do that. Where's your place?" "I'll head there right now," he said eagerly. I had to be honest. "Well, if you can make it. I'm in Hawaii right now. I have a vacation home here," I said. Both Edward and my mother-in-law couldn't hide their shock. "What do you mean, Hawaii? We can't afford to go there right now." Edward panicked. I calmly replied, "Weren't you planning to travel abroad? Just swing by Hawaii. Your mother would love it. And you did ask my family for my phone number, right? Didn't you realize it was an international number?" I added, "Oh, and don't forget the cost of this call. It adds up if you're on for a long time." To make my point clear, I said if we get divorced, I might think about helping with the money too. Edward quickly replied, "All right, I got it. Let's just get divorced first then." It seems like Edward realized his debts were something he couldn't trade for anything else. So I told him I'd deliver the divorce papers once I got back to California and ended the call. About a week later, I returned to California, made sure to have the divorce papers properly written up, and the divorce went through without a hitch. Edward looked quite worn out, so I guess he's been living pretty lean these last few days. He mentioned something at that time. It turns out he had been counting on my money for the overseas trip as well. Hearing that didn't even surprise me anymore. They probably thought I would pay off their debts, but of course I had no intention whatsoever of doing that. What I proposed was, first of all, for both of them to stop living so extravagantly, and then for Edward and my mother-in-law to work hard. I told them if they did, they could eventually pay off the debt and at least manage the basics. When Edward heard this, he lashed out. "Hey, that's not what you promised. You were supposed to think about the debt." But I was like, "That's why I did you a favor by thinking of a way for you guys to handle your debt repayment. So good luck. Once you can afford to travel abroad again, I'll invite you to my Hawaii villa," I said with a touch of sarcasm and left their place. Afterward, they both seemed to be working themselves to the bone from dawn till dusk, barely scraping by. It's probably a good lesson for them since they've had it easy until now. On a different note, I heard that Jessica also built a house in Hawaii. I had a reunion with her after so long. She took up a job that took her around the world after graduating from middle school and now seems to be a company president just like me. She had her parents come over to the house she bought, and they are living it up together. So I called my parents over from California, and we started living here. Now, I sometimes visit Jessica's place. We both feel blessed to be able to give back to our parents and encourage each other as we work hard at our jobs. My name is Nancy, and I'm 32 years old. I work in an administrative role at a small to medium-sized company while also managing my responsibilities at home. My husband, Damon, and I met through mutual friends, and we've been married for 3 years now. The initial excitement and thrill of our marriage have faded, but we've been spending our time together peacefully without major issues, at least when it's just the two of us. "Nancy, did you make this miso soup with broth? It has no flavor at all. Did you properly use kelp and bonito flakes?" Damon asked one evening. "I'm sorry, but the cleaning of the entrance and bathroom wasn't perfect either. What kind of upbringing did you have? Do you understand what I'm saying?" "Yes, I understand," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. During the holidays in May, I was expected to accompany Damon to his parents' home, where my mother-in-law, Kathy, assigned me household chores. Every holiday, I'm taken to Damon's parents' house and made to do tasks, constantly criticized and nitpicked over every little mistake. My father-in-law, Mike, and Damon are usually engrossed in newspapers or their smartphones, completely ignoring Kathy's behavior. "I'm sorry," Damon said on our way home, trying to comfort me. "My mother has always been talkative, but she seems very lively when you visit, so I think she might actually be happy." It felt off the mark. Kathy was probably lively because she could freely complain about me. Seeing my friends around me also troubled by similar mother-in-law issues, I convinced myself that this was normal. I believed that if I endured it, the problem would be resolved one day. When my husband's elder brother Jack got married, it introduced a new dynamic. Jack has a reserved personality, contrasting sharply with Damon, and our interactions had always been limited to mere greetings. Jack's bride, Meg, was a young and beautiful woman, significantly younger than him. It was a bit surprising to think of them as a married couple, but Kathy was elated, saying, "That's our Jack, managing to get such a young bride." This new year would be the first with Jack and Meg present. They had been busy with work until the end of the year and planned to visit right after the new year. As such, I had been staying at my in-laws' house since New Year's Eve, and Kathy assigned me even more chores than usual. "Nancy, are you still cleaning? If you keep going at this pace, the year will end. Please prepare the soba noodles quickly." "Understood," I replied. "Oh, I'm looking forward to tomorrow. Since the bride is young, I'll have to educate her properly," Kathy said, clearly excited. I let out a small sigh. From my position as a fellow daughter-in-law, I felt more sympathy than gratitude. Tomorrow, I decided I would actively support Meg. With that determination, I wrung out the cloth in the cold bucket of water. The next day around noon, Jack and Meg arrived. Meg, although glamorous in appearance, acted politely, and I found her likable. However, it seemed like Kathy was working hard to find any tiny flaw in her. I thought she was desperate because the first impression of Meg was crucial. "Nancy, prepare the tea quickly and set up the New Year's dishes as well." "Understood." "Nancy, please help out too," Meg said, her eyes widening in surprise as she headed toward the living room. "It's always been customary for daughters-in-law to be in the kitchen, hasn't it, Mother?" Jack interjected. "Just sit down, Meg, and leave your luggage at the entrance." Kathy, with her piercing gaze, pulled Meg into the kitchen after telling me make sure to educate her properly before returning to the living room. With a grin, I approached the bewildered Meg. "It's tough on your first visit, isn't it? In this house, the daughter-in-law prepares everything for the guests. The teapot is over there, and the teacups are around here." As I showed her around the kitchen, Meg stared at me in astonishment. Nancy, how do you know where everything is in someone else's kitchen?" she asked. "I handle most of the housework when I'm here," I replied. "I see. So in this house, the daughter-in-law doesn't get to eat until everyone else is finished, and until then, she focuses on preparing the dishes." "That's right." Meg's eyes widened, and she suddenly raised her voice so loudly it made my ears ring. "What?" Kathy quickly rushed in from the living room. "What happened?" Meg, still shocked, turned to her. "Kathy, I'm appalled. Is this how you welcome me, with instant bullying?" "Huh?" Kathy was taken aback as Meg approached her, forcing her to step back slightly. "This is definitely bullying. Making the daughter-in-law do all the work and not even letting her eat. It's like I'm watching an old drama. I can't believe mothers-in-law like this still exists. I feel like I need to protect myself." "What are you talking about?" Kathy stammered. "Kathy, is bullying your daughter-in-law a tradition in this house? Do you feel an urge to torment the woman who stole your son?" "That's not bullying, it's a lesson," Kathy said, her lips quivering. "Making the daughter-in-law do all the housework and not even letting her eat. Is that what you call a lesson?" Meg retorted. "Nancy, what do you think?" Caught off guard by this sudden question, I hesitated. Meg, with a detective-like enthusiasm, tapped her forehead and circled the kitchen. "If it's a lesson, is it recommended by the Board of Education? Are schools teaching that daughters-in-law should eat last? I've never heard of that." "Well, I guess," I mumbled, overwhelmed by her persistence. Meg gave a bright smile and looked back at Kathy. When Kathy arrived, I wondered if she saw herself as a charming lady meant to pass down the tradition of tormenting daughters-in-law to the next generation. It was clear that Kathy was already panicking. Is this really the custom around here? Maybe we should ask the neighbors, Kathy suggested. How about we go next door and find out? That's enough, Meg interrupted firmly. Once the New Year's feast is ready, both of you should sit down promptly. Surprised by Meg's sudden assertiveness, Kathy was momentarily taken aback. Victory, Meg. Let's finish up quickly and have lunch together, she said, dropping her inquisitive demeanor. Meg smiled warmly, but Kathy eyed her sternly, clearly not pleased with how easily Meg had taken control of the situation. It was surprising to see Meg's unique logic so effectively overpower Kathy's usual dominance. The dynamic I had always taken for granted was starting to crumble before my eyes. Meg seemed so confident that I genuinely believed she might go and ask the neighbors about the custom. But this was just the beginning of a clash between Meg and Kathy. I knew Kathy, despite being initially overwhelmed, wouldn't give up easily. When we finally sat down at the table, Damon and Mike looked astonished, as always, saying nothing. Jack seated Meg beside him, visibly relieved. Kathy, having recovered from the earlier incident, was now keenly observing Meg, waiting for her to slip up. Despite the tension, Meg remained calm. "This is delicious. Did you make all of this, Nancy?" she asked. "Yes, I did," I replied. "I absolutely love your stew and steak," Meg complimented with genuine enthusiasm. "I would crave these dishes all year round," Meg said, her youthful charm warming my heart and making me smile, something rare in my in-laws' house. As we ate, Meg reached for the soy sauce, only to find the bottle empty. "It seems we're out of soy sauce. I'll go get it," she said. "Thank you, Jack," she added with a smile as he got up to fetch it. Kathy, unable to resist, made a pointed comment. "Making your husband do such tasks reveals a lot about your upbringing." Meg, surprised by Kathy's remark, quickly responded in a way that caught her off guard. "A phrase like that reveals a lot about your upbringing too," she replied. Kathy gasped at Meg's retort. "I've never heard of such a phrase before. It's surprising that people still use expressions like that in the 21st century. What do you think, Jack?" Meg turned to him, mimicking a news anchor. Jack chuckled and said, "It feels like something from history. Maybe it should be reported for its academic value." Kathy's eyes widened in disbelief. Setting the joke aside, Jack then said seriously, "This is my home. It's natural for me to help out. Making Meg do everything is such an outdated way of thinking." Outdated, the word left Kathy speechless once again. The atmosphere felt different from when it was just Kathy and me. Damon and Mike stood there awkwardly, unsure of what to do, while Jack and Meg happily enjoyed the New Year's dishes and sashimi. Watching them, a different emotion began to well up inside me. After lunch, as I was relaxing in the Japanese-style guest room following the cleanup, Kathy slid open the door with a scowl on her face. "Nancy, what about babies?" she asked. This was a topic she always brought up. It seemed she targeted me at this moment to avoid confronting Meg. Somehow, the situation felt almost comical, and the usual discomfort I felt began to fade. I felt a slight relief, though not completely at ease. "Have you consulted a doctor?" Kathy pressed. "Yes, I have," I replied. "The doctor said there's no problem on my end." "Then what's the issue? You're not suggesting the problem lies with my son, are you?" Normally, I would have ended the conversation there, but today was different. "I've been thinking that Damon should also get tested," I said, straightforwardly voicing what I had kept to myself for so long. Kathy, used to my usual compliance, was stunned, momentarily frozen as her face paled. "How foolish can you be, Nancy? Testing my son? There's no way he could have a problem. Understand this, if a child isn't conceived, it's the wife's fault. So if there's no issue with you, conception should be easy. How dare you blame your husband for your own inadequacies? How shameless. Excuse me, if you're childless for 3 years, you should leave. What's the point of having a barren woman as a wife?" Kathy spat out the words, her voice dripping with disdain. Just then, Meg appeared behind Kathy, who let out a startled, croaky shriek of surprise. I was startled too, but I was glad Meg was there. Her presence was a welcome relief, a reminder that I didn't have to conform to the strange norms of my in-laws. She had always told me that there was no need to follow bizarre rules, especially when they weren't normal. It was okay to point out the oddities, to stand up for myself. Today, I wanted to match her strength. More than anything, I wanted freedom from this oppressive house. "I've never heard the term stone woman before, Nancy. Did you know this difficult term?" Meg asked, jestingly pointing an imaginary microphone at me. No, I replied, catching on to her playful tone. I first heard it from Kathy and looked it up on my smartphone. It means a woman made of stone, implying she can't get pregnant, like she's cold and lifeless. Meg nodded, then with a mischievous smile, added, Kathy is a living relic, a cultural heritage, isn't she? My heart raced, but I matched her pace and smiled. Sensing the change in my behavior, Meg beamed with approval. Mother, you're such a stereotypical mother-in-law, like a pro at tormenting your daughter-in-law. That's enough. Kathy finally lost it, bombarded with criticism and frustrated that she couldn't criticize me as she pleased. Hearing her outburst, Damon and Jack rushed in. Jack, what's with this woman with no common sense? Kathy demanded, her voice trembling with anger. Ignoring Kathy's enraged shout, Jack stood unwaveringly beside Meg. Aren't you the one lacking common sense, Mother? It's despicable to look down on someone else's daughter. I've endured my own hardships, haven't I? Isn't it my turn to make others suffer? Didn't Grandma pass away when I was just a child? How many years did you truly suffer? Your character and outdated values are your own doing, not Grandma's. Jack, is this woman the reason you're talking like this? This woman brings misfortune. Leave Jack and get out immediately, she demanded. It's not her, Mother. I've always disliked how emotional and self-centered you are. I could see my future wife suffering because of you, which is why I hesitated to marry. But Meg assured me it would be okay. If I'm to part with anyone, it would be you, not Meg, Jack replied, his usual calm demeanor replaced by a fierce defense of his wife. Tears welled up in my eyes at the sight of Jack's defiance. Kathy seemed taken aback by her son's boldness. Then I will leave and never return to this tormenting house, she said. Why should Jack also leave? You should stay here. You're my child, Kathy protested. Not anymore. Goodbye, Mother, Jack replied, picking up the luggage left by the entrance. Jack and Meg headed for the exit, but before leaving, Meg turned back and extended her hand to me. Nancy, would you like to come with us? She asked, her warm smile drawing me in. Thank you, I will, I responded, feeling a sense of relief. Nancy, my silent husband finally spoke up, but it didn't matter. I took only the essentials and left with Jack and Meg. They drove me away, leaving my in-laws' house behind. I'm sorry, Nancy, for speaking out of turn earlier. You must have thought it was strange, Meg said, sitting next to me in the back seat. It's okay, thanks to you and Jack, I feel relieved, I replied, grateful for their support. I replied with a smile, feeling a sense of calm wash over me. Meg's face, now free from the tension of earlier, looked serene. This must have been her true self. She had likely been trying to support me throughout the day. I'm sorry we couldn't intervene sooner, Meg said softly. I've always been concerned, but I wasn't sure if it was my place to interfere with Damon's marriage. Jack glanced at me through the rearview mirror, his expression a mix of apology and frustration. It's not your fault, I reassured him quickly. My brother, father, and I have long been troubled by my mother's personality. It's strange, but we've learned to ignore it. Maybe Damon felt a bit relieved when the focus shifted to you, but it's inexcusable that he didn't protect his own wife. Meg continued, as we discussed earlier, Jack wasn't keen on getting married, but I was determined to marry him. I deliberately chose to get on Kathy's bad side, though I would have preferred not to if she had treated me well. It was clear that Jack and Meg shared a deep respect and care for each other. Their relationship exemplified true marital harmony, clearing the doubts that had lingered in my mind. Thanks to both of you. I feel like I've come to understand who the real adversary is, I said. Jack smiled, a mix of relief and sadness in his eyes. If it helps, I'll give you the audio recordings later, everything from today, and all the instances of harassment we've recorded over the years. We kept them, hoping we'd never need to use them. Meg added, we won't be visiting that toxic home again, but if you ever need anything, please reach out. We will always support you. Their presence strengthened my resolve. After they dropped me off, I decided to tidy up the room while waiting for Damon to return. He came home the following day around noon, and when he saw me, a look of relief crossed his face. I'm back, he said, looking weary. Last night was tough. Mom was really angry. I see, I replied calmly. But don't worry, I covered for you. I told her that Meg was just too hyper and you were surprised, so you left early. Please apologize to them the next time you see them. He continued, oblivious to the shift in my mood. That woman, Meg, right? Jack sure picked a strange one. Does she not have any common sense? I'm really glad I chose you. A wife's worth isn't just about age, you know. Haha. I cut him off with a cold tone. I realize now that choosing you was a huge mistake. He looked at me in shock, clearly not understanding the gravity of my words. As he stared into my angry eyes, the weight of the situation seemed to dawn on him. I thought I might forgive you if you changed after seeing Jack and Meg, I said, but you're no different from your mother. I'm so disappointed. What do you mean? Haven't we been doing fine? He asked, bewildered. That's because I've been enduring it all alone, I said. You've used me as a shield. No, as a sacrifice to escape from your mother. Just like your father, who acts like he's invisible, you did the same thing. Sacrifice. I didn't mean it like that, he stammered, sweat forming on his forehead in the cold room where the heater seemed ineffective. He looked completely frazzled and pitiable. I mistakenly believed you were on my side because you always covered for me, I said. But after seeing Jack, I realized that if you truly cared for me, you wouldn't have taken me to such a distressing place. And even if you did, shouldn't a husband protect his wife? He started to protest. I felt Kathy's harassment was severe, but now I see clearly. My real enemy was you all along. I came to this realization thanks to Jack and Meg. But Nancy, he pleaded, it's over. Even Kathy said there's no point in me being there. Let's do as she says. I've downloaded a divorce form from the website. Here. I picked up my packed luggage and headed for the door. While you were gone for the night, I already sent the larger luggage via delivery service. Wait, Nancy, goodbye, he called out, but I paid no heed to his pitiful cries as I left. I confidently walked out of the house I had called home for so long. With the New Year holidays behind me, I immediately sought the assistance of a divorce lawyer. Determined never to return to that place, I entrusted all the legal matters to a seasoned attorney. Kathy and Damon were clearly taken aback by the lawyer I had engaged. Thanks to the recorded evidence provided by Jack, the divorce proceedings unfolded smoothly. Kathy, still bitter, said, I'll find a better, more fertile wife for you. My lawyer reassured me, saying, she probably views a wife merely as a tool for the husband's family. 5 years later, as I watched Jessica play, I marveled at how far I had come. Jessica, it's mealtime. Use your spoon properly and remember to blow on it, I instructed gently. Katie, Meg's kind and gentle 3-year-old daughter, was playing nearby, demonstrating her affection for Jessica. Despite having no blood relation, Katie and Jessica were as close as family. 3 years after the divorce, I had remarried and soon welcomed our daughter Jessica, proving I was not infertile. My new husband and his parents are warm-hearted and considerate, not only cherishing Jessica but also deeply caring for me as their daughter-in-law. Meg, true to her promise, supported me immensely during the divorce. Our bond, which began during the divorce, evolved into a deep friendship akin to that of sisters. Damon, on the other hand, has remarried once but faced another divorce soon after. Rumors of this troubled past have cast his home in a negative light, earning it the nickname Damon's House. Women are wary of the place, and despite occasional attempts by Damon and Kathy to reconcile or seek cohabitation, I have no intention of returning. Their refusal to acknowledge their mistakes may lead them to a future of loneliness. Once Jessica can walk, let's go to that park, Meg suggested. It has soft grass and is really relaxing. That sounds wonderful, I replied. Meg and I exchanged smiles, and I felt a deep sense of gratitude, despite the hardships with Damon. My life now is peaceful, and I am thankful that I took Meg's hand and embarked on a new future.
I will never forget what my father told me when I announced my engagement. He took me to the side and said, Zoe, are you sure about marrying this man, Peter? I know you're in love with him, but I don't think he's a good match for you. Why are you saying this, Dad? He loves me and respects me. I don't care if he's not as well off as us. I know that, Zoe. You know, I built my riches from nothing. I would never disrespect the person who does not belong to my economic class. But Peter is a very sketchy man, and his mother is no different. What do you mean, Dad? I don't understand. Call it a father's instinct, so. This man doesn't love you. Yes, he showers you with affection, but always talks about how rich you are. I heard him flexing to his friends that he bagged the rich brat. Julia just laughed with him and agreed. You must be mistaken, Dad. Peter would never say those things about me. Julia also loves me a lot. I'm sure she would scold Peter if he tried to joke like that. Sometimes I wish I had listened to my father. He didn't know what he was talking about. I was a stupid girl in love. My mother passed away 2 years before I got married. My dad was sick and wasn't long for this world. I was desperate to hold on to something that would give me the will to live. Peter and Julia became those people. My dad was a rich man. He made a series of good investments that made him very financially well off. I worked hard at my job and got a moderate salary as well. All in all, we were pretty comfortable in life. My husband Peter and his mom Julia weren't that well off. Yes, Peter did earn more than me, but he came from a very humble background. His field wasn't good enough to make him a millionaire. Peter did hold some resentment towards it. He and Julia liked sophisticated and expensive things. He often complained about not having enough money. I was always glad to help them out with the little allowance my dad gave me. I even let Peter and Julia move into my house after marriage, but neither Peter nor Julia were happy with my house. They said, "It's such a shame that you live in a small house. Your dad literally lives in a mansion. How come you bought such a small townhouse?" I don't earn a lot, Peter. Dad lives in a mansion because he has lots of money. I'm a simple office employee earning a moderate salary. This house was difficult for me to buy as well. Dad helped me out with the down payment. Well, if he helped you out, he should have got you a better place. I'm sure your mom had left him something to give you when you became older. I'm not entitled to anything, Julia. Whatever my mom left behind is my dad's now. She died suddenly, so there was no will. I don't mind if I don't get anything. I'm happy with the way things are. That's a ridiculous thing to say, Zoe. I sure would have loved to inherit a lot of money. You know what? Your dad should trade houses with us. He lives alone, so he doesn't need the space anyway, right, Mom? Yeah, Peter's right, so. You can ask. Absolutely not. That house is my dad's, and he deserves to live comfortably as long as he is alive. Well, he will be alive for long now that he's sick. We can wait and compromise for a few years and see what happens. Ultimately, everything will be yours after your dad dies. You will have plenty of money to buy a big house and more. The way Julia and Peter were already making plans to spend my inheritance was super disturbing. It also didn't help that they regularly asked me to ask my dad for more money. It's not like we were hurting for cash. Peter and Julia simply wanted the millionaire life, even if they weren't one. Honestly, I was getting tired of their behavior. However, the real drama happened after my father passed away. My dad's cancer took him away from me. Pretty soon, I was devastated but got little support from Peter or Julia. They were only concerned about the date of the will reading and didn't even help with the funeral. Hell, they refused to attend the funeral because my dad was no one to them. I was heartbroken and furious at that point. My dad's words kept coming back to me. I was getting suspicious of them and started to have doubts about their intentions. I was afraid that they were really after my inheritance money. They were not allowed to be in the reading of the will. Peter and Julia said, "Why the hell are we not allowed to read the will? This is ridiculous. Lawrence was my own father-in-law." Yes, this is ridiculous. We are family and should be present for this event. We have the right to know what Lawrence left in the will. At least my son should be allowed to be there. Your son is not in the will, Julia, so he cannot read the will. Why are you two so obsessed with inheritance? You didn't even come to the funeral. It was funny how my dad was suddenly family when it came to getting an inheritance. I was pretty annoyed at Julia and Peter. What was worse was that they started to hound me as soon as I got back from reading the will. They were not allowed to see the will. I had a hard time dealing with the grief of losing my father, but I got no words of support or sympathy from them. They simply wanted to know about my inheritance. Julia asked me, "So we have been wondering about something for a while now. How much inheritance did you receive from your parents?" You must have got a lot of money. How much money did you get? My parents unfortunately didn't leave me any money in my inheritance. So I received 0. What? You didn't get any money? But your parents were rich. They should have left you something. I don't believe that you didn't get any money. I'm sure you are lying to us so. There is no way your parents didn't leave you a single penny. No, Peter. There was no money in my inheritance. The will didn't even mention me getting any kind of money. You can check my bank balance in a few days and find out. But what about their riches? Who will get those? You are their only child. I don't know about that, Julia. The lawyer just told me that I didn't get any money. It's fine by me. It was my parents' money, and it's up to them who they would give it to. That is ridiculous. You need to fight for the money. It should be yours. There is no money, Peter. They didn't have much money in the end. Whatever was left was given to charity. They have been planning this for a while now. Julia and Peter looked very pissed by what I said. I had no idea why they were being this weird about my inheritance. I almost told them the full details, but something stopped me from doing it. There was this creeping doubt in my mind that my husband and mother-in-law were up to something. I waited for them to digest the news. When Julia and Peter kept pressuring me for more information, I put my foot down. I told them firmly that I didn't get any money and even offered to show them my account in a few days. Well, a month passed and nothing showed up. In the meantime, Peter grew very restless and stopped being affectionate with me. He was always checking my account and constantly hounding me for information on my inheritance. I was starting to see where this was going. Finally, one day, I decided to put an end to it. I showed them my bank statements and said, "See, I told you that I didn't receive anything. I'm not hiding any secret inheritance money from you. Do you believe me now?" Wow, our years of hard work just went down the drain then. So his parents weren't rich, and she didn't even get $100 in the will. This is ridiculous. I can't believe this. I can't believe this either, Mom. I stayed in this marriage for nothing. I married Zoe for nothing. It was all a waste of time. What the hell does that mean, Peter? Why are you talking like this? Why do you think he's saying these things, Zoe? Who the hell would marry you without thinking about the money? My son simply married you so that we can bank on your inheritance. Now I see that you didn't even get a penny. I can't believe I wasted 5 freaking years on a useless girl like her. I could have done so much better. I was stunned to hear them speak that way about me. I could finally tell that Peter married me for money. My parents were right about him and his mom. They were freaking gold diggers. I was so freaking done with my husband and mother-in-law. I was breaking inside, but what they said next turned me into stone. Julia looked at Peter solemnly and said, "What is done, Peter. But now it's time for you to divorce Zoe. There is no reason why you should stay with her anymore. You will have time to find a new rich wife. This time, we will make sure she actually has some money to her name." Are you freaking kidding me, Julia? You are asking Peter to divorce me over money. Peter, are you going to listen to her? Of course, I would listen to her, Zoe. I married you so that I and my mom could have a comfortable life. We grew up poor, and I didn't even go to college. I had no way of earning a lot of money. So, you pretended to love me and then tricked me into marrying you. You thought that my parents would give me lots of money that I would readily share with you. Yes, that's what I thought. It was the only way I could give my mom the life she wanted. But now I see that my efforts were in vain. Mom's right. I need to divorce you and keep looking. I was stunned by what Peter said. He said those things so nonchalantly that I started to question my own sanity. Julia and Peter went on to express their frustration at my marriage and myself. I didn't hear a word after a while. I was too busy coming to terms with what they just threw at me. Their total lack of reaction and Peter's sudden shift in behavior were both depressing and angering to me. After a point, I was so mad that I wanted to scream and throw things. However, I didn't do any of that. I calmly said, "Okay then, Peter. If a divorce is what you want, you will get it. I was never the one to say no to your demands. I might as well give in to your demand now as a last favor. So, you will agree to a mutual divorce. It'll save us both a lot of money. By the looks of it, you don't have much to go on anyway. Don't think of this as an opportunity to get alimony from my son. We will fight you tooth and nail before you give up that dream. You better preserve your lawyer fees and agree to a mutual divorce. It'll be best for you. You're right. I don't have a lot of money right now, so I decided something. I will agree to a mutual divorce, but you have to sign a clause saying that we won't share any of our assets with each other. That's not a problem at all. You don't have much, and neither do I at the moment. If you can forego alimony, I'll agree to sign a divorce and won't claim anything from you. Me and Peter discussed the details of the divorce and made sure we were on the same page. I could see that Julia and Peter were both happy about me not making a fuss out of the divorce. I guess they didn't expect me to be so calm about it. Truth be told, ever since that day, I have been crying on my way to and from work. I used to sit in the parking lot of my office and cry for an hour before and after work. Peter never noticed my puffy eyes or even asked why I was leaving early for work and coming home late. Julia didn't even bother looking at me after she discovered that I had no money. All of their behavior just made me even more determined to get out of the marriage as soon as possible. I actually had Peter and Julia move out of my house to a rented space in the neighborhood. They soon settled in while we waited for the divorce to finalize. True to his word, Peter didn't demand a share of my house. I also didn't ask for alimony. In his eyes, it was a fair deal. Well, he had no idea just how far I made things out to be. He came to know about it on the day our divorce was finalized. I went over to his new rented space to drop off my wedding and engagement ring. So, I just wanted to return these to you since the marriage only brought bad times in my life. I don't want to have any memory of it. Are you sure you want to return it? I mean, you might need the money after all. It's so funny, you know so. You must have laughed at our poverty before. Look where you are now. My son is being generous and giving you the rings. You might need to sell them when your stupid job doesn't pay enough. We want Mr. Rings. They're cheap ones anyway. What would I need to sell the rings for, money, Julia? You don't have to be embarrassed. So we already know how your parents didn't leave you anything. I guess they lost everything due to poor financial decisions, leaving their daughter destitute. At that point, I laughed very loudly in her face. Julia looked confused, and so did Peter. I could tell that Peter was somewhat annoyed by his mother's behavior, and he was also surprised at my laughter. Julia said, "Why the hell are you laughing, Zoe? Did I say something funny?" "It's freaking funny how you think I'm destitute, Julia. It's also funny that you think my parents lost all their fortune." "Well, of course, you're destitute. Your parents didn't even leave you a penny. They surely messed up and ruined your life by not leaving you an inheritance." "I never said that I didn't get an inheritance, Julia. I simply told you that I didn't get any money. My parents did, in fact, leave me plenty of inheritance." "What the hell does that mean? You have an inheritance." I'm so confused. "My parents could see you and Julia for the little gold diggers you two are. So they made a secret clause in their will. It said that I would receive no monetary inheritance. Instead, I was given this entire neighborhood as my inheritance." "What? You own this neighborhood now. How is that possible?" "We would have known about your inheritance if this was true. We even signed the lease with an estate manager who didn't tell us the name of the owner. My parents wanted me to wait for a year before I got my inheritance. They wanted me to test you too and see if you are really with me for money or love. Well, of course, you failed the test, and now you won't get anything from me. Also, the estate manager was appointed by my parents to take care of the property before I inherited it. They were smart people, you know." "That is impossible. I don't believe a word you're saying. You're just embarrassed because you don't have money anymore." "Oh, really, Peter? Is that what you and your mother have concluded from this? Well, why don't you call your landlord and find out from him? Don't worry, we would do that. Then everyone will see just what a big liar you are. Julia and Peter called their landlord and asked about what I said. Since their landlord was the estate manager, he told them everything. Julia and Peter were stunned. They looked really panicked. After cutting the call, they said, "You lied to us. You tricked us into thinking that you don't have anything, but you own the entire housing society now. How dare you trick us so? You wanted all your riches to yourself, so you tricked Peter into divorcing you and made him sign papers that he wouldn't claim anything from you." I laughed at their audacity to turn this one on me. It was finally dawning on them that they had messed up royally, and now it was time for some sweet karma. I said, "It's funny you accused me of tricking you too, Peter. You tricked me into marrying you by telling me that you love me. Julia, you helped your son in this plan, and you were the one to tell him to divorce me. If anyone here was being a scammer, it was you too. As for my inheritance, you asked me how much money I got, and I answered truthfully. This was all a misunderstanding. So, what happened is in the past. Why don't we just try again in the new light? We did spend 4 years together. It would be a shame to throw it away. So now you want me back in your life. Funny how you were desperate to start afresh with a new girl. I hear that you are already seeing someone rich. Don't worry, I'll inform her about what a snake you are." Peter and Julia started to beg me not to mess up this new relationship. Peter told me that since I wasn't ready to give him another chance, I shouldn't mess up his future. I told him to freak off. Also, I informed them that I will kick them out once the property is transferred to my name. They panicked at that and started to beg me even more. In the weeks that followed, Julia and Peter showed up at my house to beg me to forgive them. Peter and Julia already have an eviction on their record, so it is unlikely anyone would give them rent. The only reason they were staying on my property was that I asked the estate manager to allow it. I also called Peter's new victim and told her everything. She was horrified by what Peter and Julia did and broke up with him instantly. She even showed me the texts. After this fiasco, Peter and Julia beat down my daughter, called me names. I promptly called the police and had them off my property. After I got my inheritance in my name, I kicked them out very swiftly. They didn't expect me to go through with the threat. They did show up on my property again, and the police were called. The cops gave them a stern warning, and I filed for a restraining order. Turns out the entire town knew about what happened. They were essentially disowned by friends and had to leave the city to start afresh. Meanwhile, I'm enjoying my new wealth and am finally free from gold-digging leeches. Are you the reserved guest I was expecting? I have something important to discuss with you. Would you mind sparing a moment? As I was about to enter the restaurant, a woman in a chef's attire, wearing a tense expression, approached me. Intrigued, I wondered what she wanted to confirm regarding my meal. However, when I listened to her, I was hit with a shocking revelation that made me go pale. My name is Emily Thompson, 31 years old, working in the advertising industry. I work diligently to create better advertisements, and although it's a challenging job, it's incredibly rewarding. My husband, John, whom I met through work, is a year older than me, and we've been married for a year. Being a dual-income household, we efficiently share our household chores and help each other manage our lives. Initially, our interactions were solely work-related, but as time went by, we started having more personal conversations and grew closer. I realized that we shared similar interests and values, and I started developing feelings for him. Fearing that we might not see each other often after our collaborative project was coming to an end, I mustered the courage and confessed my feelings to him. Despite my nervousness, he accepted my feelings, and we started dating. After a year, he proposed, and we got married. Before marriage, John revealed that he had been previously married and was divorced. They were married for about a year, had no children, and mutually decided to part ways due to differing values. It seemed like John regretted not being able to make his previous marriage work. He appeared a bit reserved when it came to love, probably because of his past experience, but I understood. As long as there were no lingering issues, I didn't mind his past. It wasn't about wanting happiness for marriage, but wanting to live my life alongside John. So I accepted the fact that John was divorced and went ahead with the wedding. Our married life was filled with happiness, but slowly, the real implications of John being divorced began to unravel. After our wedding, we moved to an apartment close to both our workplaces, and John's parents live nearby, and we get along well. Our married life has been smoother than I anticipated. Initially, I had concerns about living so close to my in-laws, fearing potential conflicts, but they were always kind to me. Given our work schedules, John and I hardly have time during the weekdays, but we make the most of our weekends. Living with my husband, due to both of us working, we don't get much leisure time together on weekdays, except for brief conversations at dinner. Therefore, we spend a lot of time together on weekends. We both enjoy eating and often cook dishes we want to try at home. Ideally, dining out would be great. But I have an allergy to fruits from the Rosaceae family, so I can't casually eat out. Even when I think a dish doesn't contain these fruits, they might be used as a hidden ingredient, making it tedious to constantly check with restaurants. Even a slight touch causes my skin to turn red and swell. I feel bad asking about ingredients at restaurants and have developed an aversion to dining out due to this. I developed this allergy as an adult, and initially, I was taken aback since I hadn't expected it. I recall a time when I ate a lot of strawberries, and my mouth swelled up, making it difficult to breathe. I used to eat fruits frequently, and after getting tested at the hospital, I was devastated to find out about my Rosaceae fruit allergy. Discovering that I could no longer eat favorites like strawberries, apples, pears, and peaches saddened me. I'd had reactions after eating food I thought was safe, only to find out they contain allergens, which further discouraged me from dining out. This made me apprehensive about buying ready-made meals or snacks, adding a bit of stress to my life. Perhaps due to the initial severe allergic reaction and the sadness of not being able to eat my favorite fruits, I became overly cautious about checking ingredients during meals with my husband. While we were dating, my constant checks made me feel apologetic. However, I can't feel at ease without thorough confirmation, and without it, I can't fully enjoy meals. Still, we love eating. My husband and I would select ingredients and enjoy cooking together, a routine that helped reduce my excessive worries. Fortunately, both my husband and his parents understood my allergies, easing the mental burden I felt after getting married. Especially my mother-in-law, who had a deep understanding of allergies due to her father's severe wheat allergy. Wheat is commonly used in many products, and even a little bit affected him. Allergies can be lethal, so we were very careful. She explained that she researched my allergy and always ensured that meals were safe for me when we dined at her place or went out. She took extra precautions, allowing me to enjoy meals without worries. "You shouldn't have to be scared during meals. I'll make sure everything is safe for you," she told me, which almost moved me to tears. I have a great relationship with my in-laws, especially my mother-in-law, who treats me like her own daughter. We'd often go out together, and my husband and his parents are wonderful people. The concerns I initially had about my allergies have vanished. One day, a project I proposed at work was successful, earning me a promotion, which I excitedly shared with my family. They were all thrilled, especially my mother-in-law. While spending time with her, she invited me to celebrate at an upscale restaurant. "That's a very fancy place, isn't it?" "I can't let you do that," I hesitated. The restaurant was in a luxurious hotel nearby, which I had always dreamt of visiting since my student days. However, it was truly upscale, and I felt it was too extravagant even for a celebration. "You don't have to hold back. This is such a joyous occasion. Let me treat you," she insisted, genuinely happy about my promotion. Her sentiment warmed my heart, but I had reservations. I remembered visiting the restaurant's website before my allergy developed and dreaming of tasting their fruit-filled tart someday. The restaurant often uses fruits from the Rosaceae family. While I appreciate my mother-in-law's kindness, besides the issue of the restaurant being upscale. I'm hesitant because they frequently use fruits from the Rosaceae family, to which I'm allergic. Whenever I dined out with my mother-in-law in the past, we informed the restaurant of my allergy beforehand. But each time, I felt guilty asking them to accommodate my dietary restrictions. So, we often chose restaurants that seldom use my allergenic foods. I worry that even if we inform this restaurant about my allergy, it might inconvenience them due to their frequent use of fruits. Of course, dishes without these fruits are safe for me, and I'm tempted to try them. However, considering the kitchen likely processes these fruits as well, the risk scares me. In the end, I decided to decline the offer because of my concerns about an allergic reaction. Still, my mother-in-law was keen on the idea. I'll inform them about the allergy when I make the reservation. Don't worry. I also have a connection there, so they'll take good care of us. I was surprised to hear that she had connection to the restaurant, given that neither she nor my husband had ever mentioned it. However, I assumed it wasn't something she boasted about. Considering my mother-in-law's enthusiasm and my genuine interest in the restaurant's cuisine, we decided to have lunch there together. Given that it was a suggestion from my mother-in-law, who had always been considerate of my allergies, I felt relieved, thinking there was nothing for me to worry about. When I told my husband about this, he was surprised to hear that his mother had connections at the restaurant. He'd also mentioned that the restaurant sometimes serves fruit, and he appreciated their consideration for allergies. When I shared with my husband that my mother-in-law had informed the restaurant about my allergies during the reservation, and that they would take precautions, he seemed relieved. It's a celebration of your promotion, right? Make sure to enjoy yourself, he said with a laugh. Initially, I declined because of my allergies, but I had always admired the restaurant, so I was excited about dining there on the day I had been eagerly waiting for. Since it was a weekday, I took a half day off after finishing my morning work. I planned to head straight to the restaurant. Being a high-end place, I chose a more formal outfit than usual and paid extra attention to my appearance. When going to work, colleagues noticed my attire and asked about my plans. When I told them about the meal, they wished me a good time before I left the office excitedly. As I entered the hotel entrance, my mother-in-law was already there. The two of us headed to the restaurant on the first floor, and since we had a reservation, we were immediately escorted to our table. Our reservation was for 1:00 p.m., but due to the busy lunchtime, we were informed that the serving might be a bit delayed. Understanding the popularity of the high-end restaurant, I decided to order just drinks for the time being and wait patiently. Having already finished work and being encouraged by my mother-in-law, I ordered champagne. We enjoyed our conversation while waiting for our meal. Though I've had champagne before, the one I had that day tasted the best. Feeling the effects of the alcohol and the anticipation of dining at a restaurant I had longed for, I was in high spirits. From the dishes at the neighboring tables, I could tell the food looked delicious, and I eagerly awaited our meal. Suddenly, my phone rang from inside my bag. Realizing I hadn't turned it off during my meal with my mother-in-law, I tried to shut it off. Seeing the incoming call was from work, I sobered up immediately, worried that there might be a problem. I excused myself from my mother-in-law and stepped out of the restaurant to take the call, ensuring no one was around in case of sensitive information. The call was regarding a document I had submitted earlier that day. My colleague urgently needed clarification. Relieved that it wasn't because of an error on my part, I answered their questions and wrapped up the call in about 5 minutes. As I was about to turn off my phone to go back and enjoy my meal, an unfamiliar woman approached me. "Excuse me, you're the customer who made a reservation for today's meal at the restaurant, right?" The woman was dressed as a chef, presumably from the restaurant's kitchen. She looked rushed and a bit out of breath with a concerned expression. I wondered why she would come out during such a busy time. I was puzzled, but when she said she needed to confirm something, I answered her questions. Her face went pale, and she urgently told me to leave the hotel immediately. "It's dangerous to go back to the restaurant now. Please leave the hotel and ensure your safety immediately." Suspicious of the woman's intense demeanor, I asked for clarification. Once I grasped the situation, I felt the blood drain from my face. I quickly hopped into a taxi waiting in front of the hotel and headed home. That evening, my mother-in-law called. When I picked up, she was furious about me leaving her at the hotel and returning home without saying anything, causing embarrassment. Since she had reserved a special course, you had everything set up to celebrate, and you just leave without a word. Don't you know basic manners? What kind of upbringing did you have? She was angry in a way I had never seen from my mother-in-law before, and she started to berate me. I had always thought of my mother-in-law as a kind and gentle person, but there was no trace of that now. I believed that the kind mother-in-law I had known would be upset if I left without saying anything, but would also be concerned about whether something had happened to me. However, she was furiously yelling with such intensity that I began to believe the rumors about her were true. As I remained silent, she continued to berate me further, complaining even about my parents and how they raised me. You've been silent this whole time. Don't you realize you've done something wrong? You're not fit to be my son's wife. After a long tirade, she finally seemed to calm down a bit. I then quietly posed a question to her. You told me that you informed the restaurant about my allergies when you made the reservation today, and I could relax, right? But the restaurant wasn't aware of my allergies. So what happened? In fact, the meal today had ingredients that I was allergic to, not only in the dessert but also in the main courses. The allergenic ingredients were used in marinades and sauces, which weren't apparent from just looking. The woman who approached me earlier had taken the reservation call from my mother-in-law, and she said that no mention of my allergies had been made. However, she noticed the allergy badge on my bag and came to check just in case. Being the chef responsible for our meal that day, she immediately noticed the inclusion of the allergenic ingredients. If she hadn't informed me, I would have unknowingly consumed the food with allergens, which would have resulted in a severe allergic reaction. Initially, I doubted that my mother-in-law would purposely make me consume allergens, but considering the woman took time out of her busy schedule to inform me, I quickly believed her. Furthermore, this woman knew about my mother-in-law's true nature, and she deduced my situation, advising me to leave immediately and ensure I went somewhere my mother-in-law would follow. The reason she knew my mother-in-law was that she was my husband's ex-wife, now working under her maiden name, Kate Young. Seeing me with my mother-in-law, she realized I was the new wife and decided to help me out. She assumed I was the new wife because she believed that my mother-in-law wouldn't have female friends, especially someone of a similar age, after getting married to my husband. The ex-wife lived with his parents and was subjected to significant mistreatment by my mother-in-law before they married. She, like me, thought the mother-in-law was gentle and kind, which left her quite baffled once they started living together. When my husband or father-in-law wasn't around, the ex-wife faced continuous criticism for her housework and was always subjected to snide remarks. Being a full-time housewife, she had no escape despite her culinary skills, honed from attending a professional cooking school. The mother-in-law still found faults with her dishes, even discarding them at times. She considered discussing this with her husband. But the mother-in-law was adept at concealing her true nature, especially around him. Feeling her complaints would fall on deaf ears, the ex-wife aimed to gather evidence. However, as she had recently become a full-time housewife, she lacked funds and was almost constantly under the watchful eye of the mother-in-law. Unable to gather proof and without anyone to confide in, she felt trapped in this life, so she fled in the form of a divorce. Despite never having worked before, she utilized her culinary license to seek employment and was lucky to land a job at the restaurant. She worked diligently, and over time, the memories of her mistreatment faded, and she began to enjoy her work. After a few years, as she matured into a full-fledged chef, for some reason, my mother-in-law discovered she worked there and started frequenting the restaurant. Upon realizing her ex-daughter-in-law was there, she discreetly threatened her for discounts while she declined absurd demands. Past traumas influenced her to yield to some, and the connection my mother-in-law spoke of referred to the ex-wife. When I questioned why she hadn't communicated my allergies to the restaurant, my mother-in-law feigned ignorance. "I knew about your allergies, so I must have told them." "Maybe it's the staff's oversight," she countered defensively, placing the blame on the restaurant staff. Given that the reservation call was handled by the ex-wife, it's probable that my mother-in-law deliberately didn't mention the allergies, intending to pin the blame on the restaurant. However, I was already onto her game, considering the restaurant's stringent guidelines on allergies. If informed, they'd have accommodated my dietary needs. Moreover, they record calls for dispute resolutions, so it would be easy to verify who was at fault. When confronted with this, my mother-in-law, not anticipating recorded evidence, fell silent. I pressed on. "You've always been cautious about my allergies. Why did you not mention them this time?" Until now, my mother-in-law was well aware of the dangers of allergies and always showed concern, so I never imagined she'd do something like this. She knew that by doing this, it wouldn't end well for me, given that we had a good relationship until now. I was curious why she acted this way and sought an explanation. After a brief silence, she shouted defiantly, "I despise you. You outshine me. You deserve some pain." She was envious since I received praise at work and was more liked in the neighborhood than her. She arrogantly claimed that even if I spoke out, no one would believe me. If it weren't for this incident, I wouldn't have believed she was capable of such actions. Thus, I had collected evidence to reveal her true nature and confronted her with it. Everyone would believe me. My parents and my husband, John, are here, listening to everything. Plus, this conversation is being recorded. Everyone present had heard her berate me and her intentions to purposely expose me to allergens. In fact, after leaving the restaurant, I immediately went to my parents' house and had John join us. I had informed them of the situation, and we were discussing our next steps when she called. So I swiftly switched the call to speaker and started recording it for evidence. As a result, we had her incriminating statements on tape. She was taken aback by my revelation and asked in a shaky voice, "Wait, is John there with you?" She never expected her son to find out and asked in a trembling voice. In response, her son, who had been silent and emotionless, gathering evidence, spoke up. "I heard everything. I can't believe you do something like this, Mom," he said in a suppressed, angry tone. She hastily began making excuses. "It wasn't like that. I didn't mean." Her desperate attempt seemed insincere, especially after her earlier outburst. His anger was evident as he shouted, not only towards Kate, but also towards Emily. "I don't even want to think of you as my mother anymore. We're cutting ties." Given the true nature of the mother he had trusted, John was beyond furious. He then declared his estrangement from her, ignoring her cries. Furthermore, my parents said that they would sue her for attempted murder, and John cut off the call, disregarding her voice. Later, when John informed his father about the incident, he was furious and suggested divorce, eventually throwing her out of the house. With no relatives to rely on, no income, and being a housewife, she clung desperately, pleading and crying. Her husband, feeling a final bit of pity, put her in a basic apartment, paid the first month's rent, and told her to find work so she could support herself. But having been a housewife, she seemed to lack the drive to work, and, for some reason, clung to both John and me. She barged into our house demanding money, but we drove her away, telling her to earn it herself, especially John, who was extremely stern, ensuring she wouldn't approach our house again. Later on, rumors suggested she started working at a nearby supermarket, but she seemed quite disheveled. Given her nasty attitude, she had no one to rely on and seemed to be struggling on her own. I hope she continues to work hard, both for her own expenses and to pay us the compensation. And I want her to stay out of our lives. As for why she did what she did, it seems she was jealous of me and wanted to see me suffer. John's ex-wife had moved in after graduating from a vocational school and became a housewife. She was submissive, obeyed her mother-in-law, and had a quiet nature due to her unpleasant character, which made her disliked by women and her enjoyment in bullying those weaker than herself. She used to take out her stress on John's ex-wife. However, I am independent, working, and getting promotions. I had a higher social status than her and was well regarded in our neighborhood. Initially, she liked me, thinking I was a competent daughter-in-law, but she gradually grew jealous. Being unable to bully me, she wished I'd be in a position where I'd become incompetent, wanting to look down on me. After the explosive call when John and his father confronted her, she confessed everything, leading to their declaration of cutting ties with her. Later, John apologized to his ex-wife for not noticing the bullying. At that time, he was new at his job and deeply trusted his mother, which blinded him to her behavior. Still, he felt he should have noticed and was regretful. His ex-wife assured him she was over it. She's dating someone now, and their conversation ended on a peaceful note. John felt relieved, knowing she was genuinely happy. Thanks to her help, I became friends with John's ex-wife. She's also career-oriented, and we get along well. Although she's his ex-wife, there's nothing concerning regarding their relationship, and I'm glad to have a friend close in age. After settling matters with the mother-in-law, John and his father threw me a promotion party. With the celebration from the two of them, I felt happy and determined to continue working hard without worrying about my mother-in-law. Greetings, I'm Felicity, and I've reached the age of 37. Allow me to recount an intriguing experience and how I swiftly handled it, as I'm not one to be deceived, contrary to many tales I've encountered. Surprisingly, I had a good relationship with my mother-in-law before everything unraveled. Our bond was smooth, filled with warmth, perfection, and mutual respect. My husband, Frank, was the love of my life, my partner in crime, and my best friend. From my perspective, everything seemed picture perfect. This isn't a delusion or oversight on my part. Sure, we had our arguments like any normal family, but there were no red flags and all seemed well. However, the shocking turn of events that followed left me bewildered. Let me narrate the incident and explain why I chose to seek revenge on my husband and mother-in-law. I had planned something special for our family. A vacation originally meant for Frank and me. However, considering Tiana, my widowed sister-in-law, and her loneliness, I decided to include her. I sponsored most of the trip, covering accommodation, meals, and activities. Frank and Tiana were only responsible for their additional expenses. The plan was to treat them to a once-in-a-lifetime vacation in Spain, exploring Barcelona's vibrant streets, savoring tapas, and enjoying the Mediterranean sunshine. The thought of creating lasting memories and strengthening our bond excited me. Little did I know that this grand adventure would lead to events that shook the foundation of trust and shattered the illusion of our perfect family. Backtracking to that fateful day, filled with hope and promise for our Spanish dreams, I stood in the living room holding plane tickets with a smile on my face. Gathering Frank and Tiana, I revealed the surprise. They exchanged puzzled glances, curiosity etched on their faces. Tiana, with her wise eyes, tilted her head slightly. With a flourish, I presented the tickets and shared my plans for our Spanish adventure, hoping to see joy and gratitude in their eyes. Frank's face lit up, expressing genuine anticipation. "Felicity, you truly are something else," he explained. Anticipation bubbled within me as I eagerly awaited the commencement of our extraordinary journey. Tiana, on the other hand, donned a gentler smile, her gaze meeting mine. "Oh, my sweet Felicity, you've truly outdone yourself. This is a gift beyond measure." "I'm deeply touched," she expressed. In that moment, pride and contentment swelled within my heart. Their reactions were a validation of the love and effort I had poured into this surprise. I had envisioned this vacation as the adhesive that would strengthen our bonds, creating unforgettable memories and fortifying the already seemingly unbreakable ties. However, As you might suspect, this tale takes a treacherous turn. Beneath the facade of our seemingly idyllic relationship, a complex web of deceit and betrayal lay in wait, ready to ensnare us all. When the truth unraveled, it would challenge the limits of forgiveness and test the very essence of family bonds. As planned, we boarded the plane, embarking on our 2-week adventure. The anticipation was palpable as we immersed ourselves in the vibrant streets and rich tapestry of Spanish culture. The first week unfolded seamlessly, with the flavors of paella, exploration of historic landmarks, and dancing to the infectious rhythms of flamenco. Laughter and joy filled the air, and I reveled in the belief that our bond was unbreakable. However, little did I know that a storm was brewing on the horizon, waiting to unleash its fury upon my unsuspecting heart. On a fateful Monday morning, as the sun bathed the city in golden hues, I woke up to find an empty hotel room. Confusion and a growing sense of unease gripped my heart. Frantically, I reached for the phone, dialing both my husband's and Tiana's numbers, hoping for an explanation. But to my dismay, their phones remained silent, their voices absent. Fear began to claw at the edges of my mind as I searched the empty room for any sign of their presence. No notes, no bags, no traces of disturbances or struggle. Just an unsettling silence that hung heavy in the air. It seemed I was left alone in a foreign land, and the minutes felt like an eternity. As despair threatened to consume me, a glimmer of hope pierced through the darkness. My phone buzzed, signaling an incoming call. It was Tiana. Relief washed over me, mingled with confusion and a deep sense of hurt. How could she leave without a word? With trepidation, I answered the call, my voice filled with a mix of concern and disbelief. "Tiana, where are you? What happened?" I questioned. Tiana's voice, tinged with a strange mix of resignation and frustration, reached my ears. However, it wasn't the same sweet voice I had always known. It sounded colder. "Felicity, I felt the need to return your calls since my phone was incessantly ringing. Oh, I'm sorry for disturbing you. I was just wondering where you two went. Your bags aren't here, and I was concerned that something bad had happened." With an indifference that shook me to the core, she uttered the next words, "We left you. But why? What happened?" "I couldn't bear to spend another week in your company, so I had to leave." "Did I do something wrong?" "Yes. I mean, how could you be so dense?" "Dense? Excuse me. You sprung up this trip on me, practically forcing me to go with you. I couldn't remain disingenuous any longer. Let me spell it out clearly for you, Felicity. I don't enjoy your company. Sure, we can spend a couple of hours together at a family event, but 2 weeks? I tried to be civil and grace you with my presence for as long as I could. Turns out I could only master 1 week with you before I lost my mind. I'm sorry, but I'm on the way to the airport with Frank right now. We can't be around you any longer." Shock reverberated through my core as the revelation struck me like a bolt of lightning, unraveling the threads of trust I had so naively woven. How could our seemingly unbreakable bond crumble beneath the weight of unspoken grievances? Questions flitted my mind as I grappled with this harsh reality. What had I done wrong? What exactly did I do to deserve such harshness? How did things escalate to this point? Was there no chance for reconciliation? Confusion and heartache intertwined within me, the pain of betrayal seeping deep into my soul. I didn't know you felt this way, Tiana, honestly. And you had no reason to. I'd always led you to assume that things were fine and dandy between us. Why not bring that up? Why not sit me down so that we could hash out whatever problem there was between us? Because if I'm being honest, I still don't know what I've done to wrong you. That's the thing. I just can't put my finger on it, but you just irk me. What? That's the most childish thing I've ever heard. You can't stand me just because of some inexplicable irk? Grow up, Tiana. I thought I offended you or something, but I didn't do anything wrong, right? Not necessarily, but it doesn't matter. What matters is how I feel about you, and I feel that you're annoying, and I just can't stand being around you. If that's the case, Then why did you say yes to coming with us on this trip? Because it was a free trip to Spain. No one is going to turn down that opportunity. But as the days went by, I grew more and more tired of your antics. What antics, Tiana? What did I do that was so bad that you decided to leave me all alone in a foreign country? She failed to answer, and I grew more impatient with this impromptu disdain coming out of nowhere. I was shocked, hurt, confused, and angry. But most of all, I was just sad. I had to inquire about my beloved husband and what he had to say in all of this. Let me speak to Frank, casually and easily. Tiana passed the phone on to Frank. Assuming someone, likely Frank, was eavesdropping on the entire conversation, he responded with the same indifference and coldness as his mother. Hello. Really, Frank? You decided to leave me too. I didn't leave you because I don't like you. I left because my mom needed me to take her home. So you knew about all of this? How long have you known about your mother's apparent hatred towards me? For some time now. I was hoping this trip would bring her closer to you, but I was wrong. Okay, but what I'm failing to understand is why none of you approached me about this. We're all adults, meaning if there's an issue, we solve it. It's not like we haven't had arguments in the past. We sat down and solved those arguments. What's different about this time? Frank failed to answer, mirroring his mother's earlier silence. The only thing I can safely conclude about this entire stupid debacle is that your mother hates me for a silly reason, which she knows isn't valid. Maybe she's jealous of me or something. Maybe I have something she can't have, and she knows she can't speak up about it without sounding foolish. So she's beating around the bush. Am I correct in assuming that? Their resounding silence affirmed my assumption. Well, I can say that I'm honestly shocked. I didn't know that you two felt this way about me. I hope you have a safe flight back home. I cut the call, pacing around the hotel room, still trying to understand the issue. As I contemplated whether I deserved this treatment, I realized that 47 years on this planet had taught me that sometimes people hate for no apparent reason, driven by jealousy or bitterness. It's not uncommon, but the last people I expected this behavior from were my own family. After sobbing for some time, I had an epiphany, taking me back to the moment when I decided to take control of my destiny and seek vengeance against those who wronged me without cause. It was a pivotal moment that would forever change the course of my life. Wiping away my tears, a newfound determination welled up within me. I refused to waste any more precious emotions on their actions. It was time to show them they couldn't trample over my heart and get away with it. With trembling fingers, I dialed my childhood friend Arlo's number, knowing I could trust him with my darkest secrets. After pouring out my heart and explaining the painful betrayal, I cautiously asked if he could assist me in my quest for justice. Arlo, always the loyal and mischievous friend, listened intently, his voice filled with a mix of concern and excitement, reassuring me that he had my back. Felicity, my dear friend, you're a force to be reckoned with, and you know you can count on me for anything and everything. So, what are you planning on doing? Well, Arlo, you know how your construction company always has excess sawdust. Yes, it can be quite a hassle to get rid of sometimes. I believe I've found the perfect use for it. His curiosity piqued. I unraveled my plan like a carefully crafted script, detailing how we would execute the ultimate act of retaliation. Bags of sawdust would be delivered to Tiana's house, infiltrating every corner and crevice, leaving an indelible mark of chaos and betrayal. Arlo couldn't help but smile at the brilliance of my idea, a subtle yet impactful reminder to Tiana of the stress she had unleashed upon my life. Armed with Arlo's expertise and my newfound determination, we set our plan into motion. The question arose, how would we get inside the house before they returned? You need to get the spare key hidden under the potted plant on the patio. Then you'll be in. Wow, you thought of everything, huh? I'm not one to be played with. I think I'm a reasonable woman, but if they want to go lower and act childish, then I'll go even lower. Atta girl. As the hours passed, anticipation swirled within me. Arlo assured me that the mission was complete, and soon, I would witness the fallout of our carefully orchestrated chaos. Then, like a sweet melody in my ear, my phone chimed with a message from Arlo. I eagerly opened the pictures he had sent, revealing a sight to behold. Tiana's once pristine home now resembled a post-apocalyptic wasteland, drowned in a sea of sawdust. Every nook and cranny had been touched by our mischievous hands, a scene straight out of a surrealistic painting, an embodiment of the chaos that had unfolded in our lives. I called Arlo, and his laughter echoed through the phone. I couldn't help but join in. It was a cathartic release, a shared moment of triumph against those who had betrayed me. I expressed my heartfelt gratitude to Arlo, acknowledging his willingness to tread the path of mischief with me. He simply said, "Naughty can be so satisfying, my friend." As the clock ticked away, I could feel the tension building within me. How would Frank and Tiana react when they walked through the doors of their once beloved home? The anticipation was almost unbearable, a heady mix of nerves and vindication. I couldn't help but relish in the thought of their bewildered faces and disarrayed emotions. Hours later, my phone erupted with frantic energy. It was Frank, his voice laced with panic and disbelief as he described the chaotic scene that awaited them, the sawdust-covered house standing as a testament to their betrayal. My heart danced with wicked delight as I listened to his exasperated voice. At that moment, I knew that the message had been received loud and clear. Their actions had consequences, and the chaos they had sown had come back to haunt them. Felicity, it's just awful. Mom is in hysterics. I decided to reveal the part I played in this and said, "It serves both of you right. How could you leave me here alone without a valid reason, no less?" "Wake, Felicity, was this your doing?" The wailing and panic in the background stopped, and instead, I approached Frank's phone. I heard my mother-in-law say, "Give me that," before shouting in my ear, "How could you do this to us?" To me. "I have no idea what you're talking about. Have you considered that this is just your karma?" "Oh, come on, Felicity. We all know it was you. Who else would have access to my home?" "It's very easy to break into someone's home nowadays, Tiana, especially if you don't have any security cameras installed, which, by the way, you should seriously consider doing to prevent things like this from happening again. Honestly, Felicity, how can you do this to us? When are we supposed to sleep? This sawdust is making my lungs ache." "Oh, that's right. You probably forgot to get the keys to my house, huh? Well, that's a shame. I'm guessing you two are going to have to stay in yet another hotel. But for how long? Until I decide to come back from my vacation, I guess. I mean, I paid for 2 weeks after all, and who knows, I might feel greedy and decide to extend my stay." Frank then took the phone from Tiana, and she began to bawl once again, mourning her ruined furniture. "Felicity, this was foul. How could you do this? I don't know why you're assuming that I had anything to do with this. I mean, how could I? I'm currently relaxing in the hotel jacuzzi. How could I have done this?" I held back my laughter as the two of them were clearly confused as to what had happened, even though they suspected I had something to do with it, which I obviously did. But they didn't have any solid proof, so I basked in all the glory of knowing that they were frustrated but had nowhere to direct their anger. As I bid Frank farewell on the phone, a sense of contentment washed over me. I had taken control of my narrative, leaving them to grapple with the consequences of their actions. I know what I did was quite foul and even quite dangerous considering how old Tiana is. I mean, spending even a night in that house could lead to serious health consequences. But I knew that they wouldn't dare to dream of staying there. It was too sabotaged to be habitable. They just had to rely on staying in a hotel for a little bit longer because I didn't want my money to go to waste. I stayed that extra week in Spain, enjoying the culture as I intended, while my husband and my mother-in-law were undoubtedly worried, trying to find a cleaning company that would take on such a daunting task. I didn't know how long it would take to get the house professionally cleaned, but I knew that in the meantime, my mother-in-law would have to stay with us in my home. and I knew that she would just be irritated the whole time since she apparently can't stand my company. This should serve as a reminder to some of you that some people need to learn the hard way. And if it just so happens that you can dish out your own justice, then by all means, go ahead and do it, and really give people something to be mad about. Since Michael and Sarah returned for a hometown childbirth, please leave. My mother-in-law stated in a chilly voice. Her eldest son and his wife are due in 3 days. Me leave? I asked, confused and stunned. Yes, we don't need another mother figure anymore. You've been redundant for a while now. Michael and his family will be living here, so make sure you're out by tomorrow, she continued. I knew I was never truly accepted into the family since the day I got married. Treated as a wife, never did I imagine they would tell me to leave. You barren failure, you were allowed to experience raising a child. Be grateful. We have no obligation to support you anymore. It seems like Simon is tired of you too. What's Simon to? I gulped down my saliva. If it's not a conspiracy between my mother-in-law and Michael, then I don't need to stand in ceremony with my husband anymore. Foolish to drive me out, but it was my mother-in-law who ignited this. What happens to this house now is none of my concern. May they face the reality they have ignored squarely. Personally, I'm Anna Thompson, 45 years old, living with my husband and mother-in-law in a popular area close to the station. The access to the city center is superb. When house hunting, my picky husband, recently promoted to a managerial position, insisted on a spacious apartment. The rent was steep, but the space and rooms made it worth the stretch. My husband, Simon, 8 years my senior, a divorce I met through a friend's introduction. Comforted by the enveloping kindness unique to an older man, we decided to get married after 2 years of dating. Even when I told him about my infertility due to past illness, his affection did not waver. Likewise, my feelings remained unchanged when I learned of the circumstances he carried. My husband had a son named Michael from his previous marriage. I'm truly sorry to ask you, who have never been married, to live with my parents and son. I won't make you suffer. I'll ensure you're happy. That was the promise he made to me. To prevent me from feeling suffocated, my husband suggested moving to a spacious apartment where I could have my own room. Michael, turning 10 this year, won't need much care with my mom around. You don't have to push yourself. After his divorce, my husband got help with childcare from his parents at their home. A few years later, Simon's father passed away in an accident, and it seems his mother took over as Michael's caretaker. From the first meeting, Michael wouldn't even make eye contact with me. I thought it might be his shy nature, approaching a difficult age, so I didn't worry. As long as they accepted me as a member of the household, I was content. My mother-in-law was a quiet and refined person. When I visited to formally introduce myself after our engagement, she treated me with such politeness that I thought we would get along fine living together. I'll continue to prepare the meals as I have been. Simon comes home late, so it's okay if we eat at different times, right, Anna? I'll leave the cleaning and laundry to you. All right, let's work well together. After getting married, I switched from a full-time employee at the pharmacy to a part-timer due to the division of household chores. I started work a bit later in the morning, so I wouldn't get home until nearly 8 p.m. Dinner was always ready when I arrived, making me feel good about living together. My mother-in-law and Michael usually had dinner before I got home, so I was always eating alone. Even after getting married, I sometimes felt a sense of, is this it? But I came to accept that this was our family style. From the beginning, my mother-in-law never really liked me and didn't consider me part of the family at all. Michael, the school's activity day is before summer, right? When is it? We're all going to see you. Sometime after getting married, I tried to break the ice with Michael, who still hadn't warmed up to me. No, as Michael faltered, my mother-in-law interjected, we'll go there, just Simon and me. Anna, you don't need to worry about it. I misunderstood her words, thinking she was just being considerate. I can get the day off work. Let's all go together. You don't need that. You're Simon's wife. And Mick's family has always been just Simon and me. I was quite shocked when I brought it up with my husband at night. He said, Mom's been clinging to Michael. She probably thinks you're trying to take him away. I'll talk to her eventually. I began to join as a mother at the activity day, but Michael and I rarely spent any time together outside of school events. Sometimes I could tell Michael wanted to say something, but my mother-in-law always cut in between us. I later found out that she had been bad-mouthing me to Michael. Anna said she could be happy with Simon if Michael weren't around. She's a terrible person. Dad must be deceived by her too. If a boy in his formative years hears such things, it wouldn't be strange for him to distrust me. It was a sickening story, but at that time, I hadn't imagined that my mother-in-law could do such a thing. After graduating high school, Michael immediately moved in with his girlfriend and left home. As soon as he started college, a year after he started working, he married her without a ceremony. Once Michael moved out, my mother-in-law surprisingly stopped doing housework altogether. Instead, it seemed that picking on me had become her sole entertainment. She stopped cooking, which she used to do before, and now just sits at the dining table waiting for me to come home. Without a moment to sit down, I would stand in the kitchen and prepare dinner. You're really inefficient. At this rate, it'll take you all night. I was never good at cooking, partly because I had always relied on my mother-in-law to prepare the meals. Whenever I did manage to cook, she would taste each dish and invariably complain, "This tastes awful. I'm sorry, I'm trying my best." You're astonishingly tone-deaf when it comes to flavors, Anna. It's a good thing Michael never had to eat this. How terrible. If she thought so, she might as well make it herself. But it seemed she just wanted to complain to me. Not just about the meals, but she started nitpicking everything from the cleaning I never used to do to the laundry. Why are there so many wrinkles on the laundry? You have to vacuum every nook and cranny. You really can't do anything right. Didn't your family teach you anything? With that, my mother-in-law sighed while looking at me being belittled. Even about my family, I clenched my fists in frustration. I don't know how you won over Simon, but I can't see much charm in you as a woman. And she always concluded with the same line, "If you hadn't come, Michael would have never left." I understood that there was a gaping hole in her heart since Michael had left. Maybe it was what they call empty nest syndrome. If taking it out on me made her feel better, that's what I told myself to endure it. But her bullying took on new energy after a certain event. That event was the pregnancy announcement for Michael's wife, Sarah. The joy my mother-in-law exhibited was unlike anything I had seen before. It's Michael's baby. It's bound to be adorable. Yeah, he'll be my first grandchild. Watching the two of them rejoice, I was happy too. But my mother-in-law's excitement was beyond normal, probably because Michael asked her, "Grandma, can Sarah have our baby at your place?" Sarah's family home is an hour away by plane, and since they have no one else to rely on here, they turn to us for help. Of course, my mother-in-law wouldn't dream of turning down Michael's request. The phone calls from Michael started to become frequent, and her excitement went through the roof. The next day after getting the news, she started preparing enthusiastically. From cleaning out Michael's room to preparing the bedding and making a list of baby items, it was like she had great-grandchild fever. Naturally, I had to get involved too. When I returned from work, Anna, I vacuumed Michael's room. So you need to wipe the floors and the windows and please wax them too. This weekend we're going to the department store to look at baby cribs. Cleaning and waxing at night was tough, especially after a long day at work. If I even thought about cutting corners, I'd be told to do it over again. Moreover, my mother-in-law started asking for money, and before I knew it, the house was overflowing with baby stuff. "Anna, I need you to withdraw some money tomorrow. There are things I want to get ready for the baby again. Isn't it wasteful to prepare so much when Sarah and Michael haven't even arrived? Shouldn't we wait and choose together with them?" I had wanted to meet my mother-in-law's requests, but I was troubled by the relentless spending. How can you be so cold? It's Simon's grandchild. Oh, that's right. You're not related to Michael by blood. You don't care, do you? That's not true. Please don't say that. I just thought Sarah might want to pick things out herself. When do you want to choose things for your own child? Perhaps because I was making a valid point. My mother-in-law glared at me sharply. I immediately thought I had gone too far, but it was too late. Without a word, my mother-in-law went back to her room looking upset. I did reflect on it, but I was also shocked to be spoken about in such a way regarding Michael. The next morning, my mother-in-law didn't come out of her room, perhaps still angry. Simon had a 3-day business trip starting that day, so he just called out, "I'm leaving," through her door. Please don't throw cold water on Mom's great-grandchild fever. She hasn't been the same since Michael left. You were worried too, right? I was. But if we spend all our money like this, we'll have nothing left when Michael and Sarah arrive, right? Simon's face immediately turned sour. Are you saying my earnings are too low? That's not what I'm saying at all, Simon just said, "Fine," and left with a look of dissatisfaction. Discussions about money always end up like this. Since I'm the one managing our finances, I can't help but think ahead. Of course, there's a reason for that. We've been married for 13 years. Simon has provided me with a very comfortable life. Your part-time income is for you to enjoy. Simon had always told me so. I saved everything beyond what I needed for myself. Even though it's in my name, I consider it our shared property. But then Simon's company's performance declined, and over the last 5 years, his salary has dropped to 2/3 of what it was when we first got married. While there's uncertainty whether his company will last until his retirement, he doesn't seem to consider changing jobs. For appearances in front of my mother-in-law, my husband couldn't give up his title as a department head. Now I'm the one paying the rent, and he covers the living expenses. We've kept this from my mother-in-law to save my husband's face. That day, I left work a bit early to apologize to my mother-in-law. When I got home, she was already sitting at the dining table waiting for me. I'm sorry about yesterday. I may have gone too far, I admitted, but my mother-in-law remained silent. Instead, she blindsided me with unexpected news. Michael and Sarah are returning for a hometown childbirth. Please vacate, my mother-in-law declared in a chilly tone. The eldest son and his wife were set to arrive in 3 days. Perplexed and stunned, I asked, I have to leave. She affirmed, yes, we don't need another mother figure anymore. You've been redundant for a while. Michael and his family will be living here. Make sure you're out by tomorrow. The realization hit me hard. I had never truly been accepted into the family since the day I got married. I had always been treated as an outsider. The news of Michael's return for the birth made it clear. You barren failure, my mother-in-law continued. You are allowed to experience raising a child. Be grateful. We have no obligation to support you anymore. It seems like Simon is tired of you too. Maybe he's getting along well with a new girlfriend by now. Shocked, I gulped down my saliva, contemplating the possibility of my relationship with my husband growing distant. Could this be a trap I fell into, thinking my husband would never? I remembered that, up until a year ago, he never had overnight business trips. All right, I'll eat out tonight, I said, grabbing my bag and leaving the house to walk aimlessly. I needed to calm my severely shaken heart. Worried about my husband, I tried calling his cell phone despite my mother-in-law's words. I still wanted to talk to him, but he didn't answer, no matter how many times I rang. I dialed his office, only to learn that he had taken a couple of days off. My mother-in-law's words began to ring more true. Could he really be on a trip with another woman? Dark thoughts crowded my mind, and I found myself overwhelmed with emotion, tears streaming down my face. Staggering along, I noticed the tavern behind the station, a place we used to frequent when we first moved here. It's still here, I thought as I entered. Welcome. The tavern owner's expression clouded briefly upon seeing me. Then he nodded in recognition. Hey, long time no see. It's been about 8 years. I used to come here a lot with my husband, I said. "Yes, it's been a while." "I remember you," he replied. I couldn't help but smile, feeling a sense of relief. "Can I get a beer and a mixed plate of grilled chicken, please?" I asked. The owner, a man of few words as always, nodded. As I sipped the cold beer and savored the grilled chicken, I took out my cell phone, and the screensaver lit up with a photo of us when Michael turned 18. Looking sharp in the slim suit we had picked out together, I wished for us to be closer as a family. The beer washed down my throat, taking the day's fatigue with it. Could I really move out tomorrow? Contemplating the next steps, I searched for moving companies, finding one for the job the next day. I also looked up junk buyers and saved 2 companies in my favorites. Changing the screensaver on my phone seemed to clear my head completely. The beer and grilled chicken tasted exceptional. I decided to think about everything once I got home. Walking away from the tavern, I was called from behind. A young waitress from the tavern was running towards me. "Excuse me, are you Mrs. Thompson? I noticed the screensaver on your phone," she said. Confirming my identity, she dropped a bombshell. My husband was having an affair with one of their employees. We exchanged contact information, and she promised to keep me informed. My mother-in-law's words appeared to be true. Instead of sadness, a fierce anger welled up within me. It was time to confront this head-on. Booking an appointment with a moving company, I resolved to move out that day. If it wasn't a conspiracy, and my mother-in-law and Michael were truly involved, then I no longer needed to honor my husband. Returning home, I packed my belongings until midnight. Without hesitation, the moving company arrived on time, and I made it clear that I was leaving. As requested, they took everything I had bought, erasing every trace of my presence. My mother-in-law panicked, but I was resolute. "I'm taking everything I bought. You can start a completely new life tomorrow," I declared, suppressing a laugh. Ignoring her protests, I proceeded to have everything taken out. My mother-in-law complained loudly to the movers, but there was nothing she could do. The only items left in the house were piles of baby gear and her old dresser from before the marriage. "Well then, I bid you farewell. There should be no trace of me left, so enjoy your life with Simon, Michael, and his family," I declared, leaving her sitting there stunned. Placing the keys on the table, I exited the room. The movers held onto my things for a while, and I decided to stay with a single colleague for some time. Feeling a sense of completion, I slept soundly that night. A week later, I finally heard from my husband. I wondered if he was scheming with that other woman. While my husband was dragging his feet, I received a call from the young woman at the tavern. "Got a good shot, so I'll send it to you." In the photo, my husband was chatting up a not-so-young woman at the tavern. Maybe out of a sense of justice, the young woman must have followed them after they closed. There was also a photo attached of the two entering a hotel. Even in such times, the cheating continues, I thought, and any last bit of affection I had for my husband dissipated. I asked for the woman's name and had her address looked up. The next day, armed with all the evidence of the affair, my husband called. "Anna, where are you? Michael and his family are here too. Aren't you going to come home soon?" "No, I'm not coming back. Your mom told me to leave. I'm done here. Michael and his family are going to live with you now, right?" I knew it. Michael and his family were out of money and looking to crash at our place. I heard that after graduating from a vocational school, they'd been hopping from job to job, and now they're working part-time. "No. I want you back, Anna. I went to the pharmacy, and they said you're off for a bit. Got a place to crash." "Yeah, I'm fine. So don't worry about me. Your mom and Michael didn't like me, right? I reckon they're happy to have the place to themselves without me around." My snide comment left my husband speechless. He knew his mother and Michael never accepted me as family, but pretended not to see it. "Well, all right. I have something to say, so I'll come back there once," my husband replied with a relieved please in his voice. Days later, I returned to the house for the first time in a long while. Some new pieces of furniture and appliances were inside. When Michael and Sarah saw me, they just nodded from their seats on the sofa without getting up. As I took a seat, my mother-in-law glared at me with a scary look on her face. The atmosphere was tense, and just as I thought to get things done and leave quickly, Michael spoke up. "What are you doing here? You took everything from the house. What kind of monster does that? Dad's been supporting you, and you've had it easy." I sighed. "I took everything because I paid for it. I wanted to remove all traces of me, just as you wanted, right? That's crazy, right? There's no way you could afford all that just working part-time at the pharmacy," my husband said. When I glanced at him, he started talking as if he'd resigned himself. "We've been getting by on what Anna and I both make for a little while now. Then the stuff you took should be both yours." Instead of my speechless husband, I decided to speak up. "Simon's company has been doing poorly, and his salary plummeted. That's why, for the past 5 years, I've been covering what's missing. But that wasn't enough, and now I'm the one paying our rent." My mother-in-law looked at my husband with surprise. "I'm not just a part-timer, I'm a part-time pharmacist, and the pay is quite good. I'm making more than Simon now." At my words, my husband awkwardly looked away. My mother-in-law's eyes were frantically shifting between my husband and me. "From now on, Michael, you'll be paying the rent. You're going to live here, right? After all the help your gran was given, it's time for you to take care of her." Michael looked at me with a shocked expression. When I dropped the news suddenly, "Rent? How much is it?" he asked. "It's $5,600. Good luck, since it seems my role as a mother is over. I don't have an obligation to take care of you anymore. Pull yourself together. You're going to be a father soon." Michael murmured with a shake of his head, "That's impossible." It was Sarah who raised her voice upon hearing this. "Wait, $5,600? Weren't we supposed to live here for free, covering rent and living expenses?" I almost burst out laughing. "Don't worry, Sarah. You can move to a cheaper place. Simon still makes a decent salary." Hearing this, Sarah's face relaxed a bit. "Oh, since I'll be leaving you, Simon, life might still get tough with your mistress, huh?" At that, Sarah finally broke down in tears. It was my husband who panicked. "What? What are you talking about?" Sarah replied, "Oh, your mother told me about the new woman. I guess it's time to end my role as a wife too. My husband must think there's no evidence. Indeed, it hasn't even been 10 days since I left the house. Wouldn't that hurt Mary if she heard you? Well, I'll get in touch about that later." At the mention of Mary's name, my husband jolted, realizing that I knew everything. He held his head inside. This is not the atmosphere to write a divorce paper. "Well then, I'll be going now. Please talk to me further through a lawyer." Neither my husband Simon nor Michael said anything more, staying silent as I grabbed my bag and stood up. My mother-in-law stood up simultaneously, slamming her hands on the table. She yelled with a voice too strong for an elderly woman. "What the hell? It's all your fault our home is in shambles." I was instantly irritated. "It was you who told me to leave. It was you who said Simon had another woman. And you interfered with my relationship with Michael. Everything was you." I felt a surge of heat in my chest. I regretted not being more assertive with my relationship with Michael, not holding back because of my mother-in-law. "Michael has nothing to do with this. It's time for you to step up, Simon. He's going through a hard time. You should support him as his wife, take responsibility as a family member." What is she even talking about? If she hadn't called Michael back home, if she hadn't hinted at Simon's affair, I would still happily support Simon and this home I always believed in and supported. "Simon, where are you? Michael, why are you still here?" It's all her fault. My mother-in-law's lips tightened into a line, and she was trembling. I slipped past the silent mother-in-law and quickly left the room. Afterward, Simon agreed to the divorce rather easily. It seems my determination was strong, and he couldn't counter the evidence of the affair. Shortly after, it seemed like they started the process of moving out of the apartment. In the end, Michael and Sarah went back to their apartment and never lived with the mother-in-law. Simon seems to be considering remarriage, but Mary was furious over the alimony and his request for her to live with his mother. I've heard they're considering whether to place my mother-in-law in a care facility. After all the love she poured into her son and grandson, it's somewhat sad to think they're ready to abandon her now. Perhaps she's served her purpose too. If my mother-in-law had said nothing back then, and it had just been a simple trip home for childbirth, maybe we would still be living together. After the divorce, Michael sent me an apology letter. He wrote about how, as a child, he really wanted to be more spoiled, how he couldn't talk to me because his grandma disliked it, and how happy he was when I attended school events. Maybe I should have reached out more. Perhaps then, we could have built a different relationship. Even though our relationship has ended, I quietly pray for Michael's happiness in life. I've returned to work as a pharmacist and quickly rented an apartment close to my workplace. I don't feel good about keeping the furniture and appliances I took with me, so I had them all picked up and disposed of by a junk removal service. Life without my mother-in-law's harassment is peaceful and comfortable. For a while, I want to live for my own happiness, not someone else's.